They call it a wedding, I call it a funeral. Mine. The ring weighs more than the vows, and the man sliding it onto my finger looks at me like I'm a signature on a contract, not a woman he'll wake up beside. Kyle Draven, Duke, debtor, destroyer of illusions. By midnight, I'll understand what I've really bought with my father's fortune. A title, a mansion, and a husband who won't even pretend to want me. But here's what he doesn't know yet. I didn't come here to be broken. I came here to win. So stay with me. Watch how a transaction becomes a war. And comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The chapel smelled like old money and older lies. Alara Whitmore stood at the altar in a dress that cost more than most people earned in a year. Ivory silk pooling at her feet like spilled cream, and felt absolutely nothing. Not joy, not fear. Not even the nervous flutter her mother had promised would come when she saw her groom waiting. Cale Draven didn't look at her the way a groom should look at his bride. He looked at her the way her father looked at shipping manifests. Dearly beloved. The officiant began, his voice echoing in the vaulted space. Alara's fingers tightened around the bouquet. White roses. Someone's idea of symbolism. Purity, probably. Innocence. All the things this marriage wasn't. She'd known what this was from the beginning. Her father had been characteristically blunt about it over breakfast 3 months ago, spreading butter on toast while casually dismantling her future. The Draven estate needs capital. We need legitimacy in certain circles. It's a fair exchange. You're selling me, Alara had said flatly. I'm positioning you. Her father hadn't even looked up. There's a difference. Now standing across from Kyle Draven, tall, dark-haired, with eyes the color of a winter sea and just as warm, Alara understood that her father had been wrong. This wasn't positioning, this was sacrifice, and she was the lamb. Do you, Cale Edmund Draven, take this woman? Cale's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Alara noticed because she'd spent the last 3 months learning to read him during their stiffly formal courtship. Learning which silences meant annoyance, which meant calculation, which meant he was thinking about something or someone else entirely. I do. 2 words, flat as sheet metal. The officiant turned to her. And do you, Alara Catherine Whitmore? She didn't let him finish. I do. Why drag it out? They both knew what this was. Cale's hand was cold when he slipped the ring onto her finger. The band was platinum, set with diamonds that caught the light filtering through stained glass windows. Beautiful, expensive, impersonal. When he kissed her, it lasted exactly 3 seconds. She counted. The applause that followed felt like mockery. The reception was held at Draven Manor, a sprawling estate that had been in Kale's family for 9 generations and looked like it was preparing for a 10th century of quiet decay. The grounds were immaculate. Kyle had spent some of her father's money already, apparently, but the house itself had that particular sadness of old wealth running dry. Alara moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations from people who looked at her dress instead of her face, who calculated her father's net worth instead of asking her name. The Duchess, someone whispered as she passed, testing out the title, seeing how it fit. It didn't, not yet. She found Kyle near the terrace, surrounded by a cluster of men in expensive suits. They were laughing at something he'd said, though Kyle himself wasn't smiling. He never really smiled. She'd noticed that too. As she approached, the conversation died like someone had flipped a switch. Gentlemen, she said smoothly, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Your Grace. The eldest of the group, Lord Something, she'd already forgotten, bowed slightly. We were just discussing the improvements to the East Wing. Your family's investment has been quite transformative. Your family's, not your husband's. The distinction was deliberate. I'm glad to hear it, Alara said. She looked at Kyle. Might I borrow my husband for a moment? Something flickered in his eyes. Irritation, maybe. Or just impatience. Of course. He set down his glass and offered his arm with mechanical courtesy. They walked in silence to a quieter corner of the terrace, away from the music and forced gaiety. You don't have to perform for them, Kyle said once they were alone. The transaction is complete. The contract is signed. Is that what you think this is? A performance? isn't it? He turned to face her fully for the first time all evening. Up close, his features were sharper than they appeared in candlelight. Aristocratic, severe, handsome in the way a knife was handsome. We both know what this marriage is, Ilara. There's no need to pretend otherwise. She'd expected coldness. She'd prepared for indifference. What she hadn't prepared for was the complete absence of curiosity in his voice, like she was a problem already solved. And what is it exactly? She asked quietly. A business arrangement. You get a title. I get solvency. It's clean. Clean, she repeated. The word tasted bitter. Would you prefer I lie? Cale's gaze was steady, unflinching. Tell you that I married you for love? That I've been waiting my whole life for someone like you? I'd prefer you treat me like a human being instead of a line item in your ledger. For a second, just a second, something almost like surprise crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that impenetrable mask he wore like armor. I'll treat you with respect, he said. I'll honor the agreement we made, but I won't pretend this is something it's not. What agreement? Ilara heard her voice rise slightly and forced it back down. I don't remember agreeing to be invisible. You agreed when you signed the marriage contract, or did you not read the terms? She had read them, every word. Financial arrangements, property rights, inheritance structures. What she hadn't found anywhere in those pages was anything resembling a marriage. Where will you be tonight? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Kyle's expression didn't change. I have business to attend to. On our wedding night. The timing is unfortunate but unavoidable. He was lying. She knew it the way you know when ice is too thin to hold your weight, some instinct that bypassed logic and went straight to certainty. Business, she said softly. Is that what you call her? Now she had his attention. His eyes narrowed fractionally. Careful. Why? We're being honest, aren't we? That's what you want. Honesty. Clarity. Ilara stepped closer, close enough to see the muscle jump in his jaw. So, let's be clear. You're going to spend tonight with your mistress, and I'm supposed to smile and pretend I don't know. That's the real agreement, isn't it? The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. What I do with my time is not your concern, Kyle said finally. I'm your wife. You're a business partner who happens to share my name. His voice was cold now, deliberately cruel. Don't confuse the two. He walked away before she could respond, his broad shoulders cutting through the crowd like he owned every inch of space he occupied, which, technically, he did. Ilara stood alone on the terrace, the sounds of celebration washing over her like waves against stone, and felt something harden in her chest. Not heartbreak. She'd been prepared for that. This was something else, something sharper. Determination. The manor was silent by the time Ilara made her way to the Duchess's chambers. Her chambers now, though they felt about as personal as a hotel room. The suite was beautiful in an austere way. High ceilings, antique furniture, walls the color of winter sky. A four-poster bed dominated the room, draped in midnight blue velvet. Someone had scattered rose petals across the coverlet. The traditional touch for a wedding night. She swept them onto the floor. Her lady's maid, a quiet woman named Margot, who'd been assigned to her that morning, helped her out of the wedding dress with efficient hands. Will you need anything else, Your Grace? The title still sounded foreign, like trying on someone else's coat. No, thank you, Margot. The Duke requested that I inform you he'll be staying in the East Wing tonight. He said not to wait up. Of course he did. Ilara waited until Margot left before letting her composure crack. She stood in front of the mirror in her silk nightgown, another wedding night tradition, white and virginal and completely pointless, and studied her reflection. Dark hair pinned in elaborate curls, green eyes that looked more tired than sad, features her mother called distinguished and her father called strong. Not beautiful exactly, but striking, memorable, and apparently entirely inadequate to hold her own husband's interest for even one night. She should feel humiliated, hurt. Some part of her did, she supposed. But underneath the expected emotions ran something colder and more practical. Anger, yes, but also calculation. Cale Draven thought this was a simple transaction. Money for title. Clean and complete. He was wrong. Alara began removing the pins from her hair, letting the dark waves fall around her shoulders. She'd entered this marriage with her eyes open, no illusions about love or romance. But she'd be damned if she'd spend the rest of her life as a ghost in her own house, a checkbook with a pulse. If this was war, then fine. She'd learn the terrain, gather her forces, and when the time came, she'd fight. What? Morning came with pale light and the sound of rain against windows. Alara woke alone. No surprise there, and found herself immediately awake, alert in a way she hadn't been in months. Like her body knew before her mind did that the real work was beginning. She rang for Margot and dressed in a deep green day dress that made her eyes look sharper. Armor of a different kind. "Where is the Duke?" she asked as Margot fastened the buttons at her wrists. "In his study, Your Grace. He requested breakfast be sent there." "I see." Alara turned from the mirror. "And the household staff? I'd like to meet them." Margot's hands hesitated for just a second. "All of them? Is that unusual?" The previous Duchess, the Duke's mother, she preferred to manage things through the housekeeper. Mrs. Brennan handles most of the day-to-day operations. "Then I'd like to meet Mrs. Brennan first." Something shifted in Margot's expression. Not quite approval, but close. "Of course, Your Grace. I'll arrange it immediately." The housekeeper turned out to be a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and the kind of posture that suggested she'd been holding this house together through sheer willpower for decades. She met Alara in the morning room with a face carefully arranged into neutral pleasantness. "Mrs. Brennan," Alara gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." The housekeeper's eyebrows rose fractionally, but she sat. "I understand you've been with the Draven family for many years," Alara began. 23 years, Your Grace, since the late Duke's time." "Then you know this house better than anyone." Alara poured tea, 2 cups, a deliberate gesture, and passed one across. "I'd like your help understanding how things work here. What's expected, where the boundaries are." Mrs. Brennan accepted the tea but didn't drink. "The Duke has certain preferences about how the household is run." "I'm sure he does." "I'd like to know what they are." "He values efficiency, discretion. He doesn't like to be troubled with minor details." Translation: stay out of his way. "And the previous Duchess?" Alara asked. "How did she manage things?" Mrs. Brennan's expression shuddered. "The late Duchess was often unwell. She left most matters to me." "I see." Alara sipped her tea, letting the silence stretch. "I'm not unwell, Mrs. Brennan, and I don't intend to be absent. This is my home now. I'd like to understand it. All of it." The housekeeper studied her for a long moment. Alara could almost see the calculation happening behind those shrewd eyes, deciding whether this new Duchess was worth taking seriously or just another decorative addition who'd fade into irrelevance. Finally, Mrs. Brennan nodded. "What would you like to know?" They spent the next 2 hours going over household operations, staff schedules, supply budgets, maintenance needs. Alara took notes in a leather journal, asked questions that clearly surprised the housekeeper with their specificity. "You mentioned the East Wing needs roof repairs, Sis," Alara said. "Has that been budgeted?" The Duke said it wasn't a priority. "But it's leaking?" "Into the servants' quarters, yes." Alara wrote that down. "We'll fix it. What else?" By the time Mrs. Brennan left, something had shifted between them. Not quite alliance, but understanding. The housekeeper had expected a decorative trophy wife. Instead, she'd found someone who actually cared about things like roof leaks and staff quarters. Alara allowed herself a small smile as she reviewed her notes. First battle won. She didn't see Kyle until dinner. The formal dining room was absurd for 2 people. A table that could seat 20, crystal chandeliers, portraits of dead Draven staring down with aristocratic disapproval. Alara sat at one end, Kyle at the other, with what felt like a football field of polished mahogany between them. "I met with Mrs. Brennan today," Alara said as the first course was served. Kyle didn't look up from his soup. "Did you?" "She's very capable. The household runs remarkably smoothly considering the circumstances." "Circumstances?" "The East Wing roof is leaking into the servants' quarters. I've authorized repairs." Now he did look up. "You've authorized." "Is that a problem?" Those decisions go through me. Alara set down her spoon carefully. The household budget goes through you, or the maintenance decisions do? Both. I see. So when Mrs. Brennan needs to buy new linens or repair a stove, she's supposed to come to you for permission? That's what the housekeeper is for, to manage those details so I don't have to be bothered. And when the housekeeper asks for roof repairs and you say no? Kael's jaw tightened. The East Wing renovations are low priority. The funds are better spent elsewhere. On what? The ballroom that's already been restored? The gardens that are manicured within an inch of their lives? Alara leaned forward slightly. The staff is sleeping under a leaking roof, Kael. That's not low priority. That's a negligence. Don't presume to lecture me about managing my own estate. Our estate. I believe that's what the marriage contract says. Joint ownership. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. You read the contract, Kael said slowly. Every word, including the clause about shared decision-making on estate matters. Alara picked up her wine glass. I'm not trying to undermine you. I'm trying to be a partner. Isn't that what you said you wanted? A business arrangement? Partners don't make unilateral decisions. Neither do dictators, but here we are. Something flashed in Kael's eyes. Anger, definitely, but also something that might have been respect, or at least surprise that she'd fight back. The repairs can wait, he said finally. They really can't. But if you'd like to inspect the damage yourself and make an informed decision, I'm happy to arrange that. I don't have time to... Then trust my judgment. Alara met his gaze steadily. Or admit that this partnership only works when I do exactly what you say and ask no questions. Your choice. For a long moment, Kael just stared at her. Then, incredibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Fine. Fix the roof. Thank you. Don't make me regret it. I'll do my best. They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not comfortable exactly, but less hostile. Like two people who'd just discovered they were evenly matched and weren't quite sure what to do with that information. 3 days later, Alara was reviewing household accounts in the library when Margot appeared looking flustered. Your Grace, there's a woman here to see the Duke. A lady, Lysa Crane. She's insisting. Alara knew that name. Everyone in their social circle knew that name. Lysa Crane. Beautiful, sophisticated, and if the gossip was accurate, Kael's mistress of 5 years. Where is she? The front salon. She refused to wait in the receiving room. Of course she did. Alara set down her pen with deliberate calm. Where is the Duke? Still in London. He's not expected back until this evening. I see. Tell Lady Crane I'll be with her shortly. Margot hesitated. Your Grace, perhaps it would be better to have Mrs. Brennan. No. Alara stood, smoothing her skirt. This is exactly the kind of thing a Duchess should handle personally, don't you think? She didn't wait for an answer. The front salon was decorated in cream and gold, all delicate furniture and expensive art. Lysa Crane stood in the center of it like she owned the space, examining a painting with the kind of casual familiarity that came from frequent visits. She was beautiful. Alara had to give her that. Blonde hair in perfect waves, features that belonged on a fashion plate, a figure that her dress displayed to calculated advantage. Everything about her screamed old money and careful cultivation. Lady Crane. Alara's voice was pleasant, cool. I'm afraid the Duke isn't here. Lysa turned and her smile was sharp as glass. Alara Whitmore. Or should I say Duchess Draven? How strange that sounds. Is it? Well, you're so unexpected. Lysa's gaze swept over her with deliberate assessment. When Kael said he was marrying, I imagined someone more refined. How disappointing for you. Not at all. I find the novelty charming. Lysa moved closer, her perfume, something expensive and cloying, filling the space between them. I wanted to meet the woman brave enough to marry Kael Draven. Or foolish enough. I haven't decided which. And now you have. Was there something else you needed? Actually, yes. Lissa settled onto a settee like she was posing for a portrait. I wanted to make sure we understood each other. About certain arrangements. Arrangements. Kyle and I have an understanding. We have for years. I assume he's explained the situation? Alara's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. He's mentioned you, yes. Good. Then you know this marriage doesn't change anything. Not really. Lissa's smile widened. You have the title, the house, the legal protections. I have Kyle. It's all very civilized. The casual cruelty of it was almost impressive. How modern of you, Alara said softly. I'm being kind, really. Saving you from false expectations. Kale married you because he needed your money. Everyone knows that. But he doesn't love you. He never will. Lissa leaned back, completely at ease. So as long as you don't make things difficult, we can all be very happy. You play Duchess. I keep Kyle's interest. Everyone wins. Alara studied the woman in front of her, so confident, so certain of her position, and felt that same cold determination from the wedding night crystallize into something harder. You're right, she said finally. This marriage is a transaction. Kyle was very clear about that. Lissa's smile turned triumphant. But here's what you're missing. Alara moved closer, her voice dropping. I didn't marry Kyle for love either. I married him for position, power, influence, and I intend to claim every bit of it. She paused, including my husband. Lissa's smile faltered. So while I appreciate you stopping by to clarify the arrangements, Alara continued, let me clarify mine. This is my house, my title, my marriage, and I don't share. You can't seriously think, I think you should leave now. Alara's voice was pleasant as poisoned honey. Before I have you escorted out, I assume you'd prefer to walk on your own. For a long moment, Lissa just stared at her, calculating. Then she stood, smoothing her dress with hands that trembled slightly. You have no idea what you're doing, she said. Probably not, but I'm a fast learner. Lissa left in a rustle of silk and fury, and Alara stood alone in the salon, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. She'd just made an enemy. Declared war, really, but she'd be damned if she'd spend the rest of her life being managed by Kyle's mistress. Kale returned from London just before midnight. Alara heard his footsteps in the corridor outside her room, deliberately loud, like he wanted her to know he was there. But he didn't stop. Didn't knock. Just kept walking to his own suite in the East Wing. Business as usual. She stared at the ceiling in the darkness and wondered what she was doing. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. Yes, the marriage was a transaction. Yes, she'd known it would be cold. But she'd thought, what? That mutual respect would develop? That Kyle would see her as something more than a solution to his financial problems? Foolish. Except she couldn't shake the memory of his expression at dinner when she'd challenged him. That flash of something that wasn't quite hostility. Recognition, maybe? Or interest, like he'd been waiting years for someone to push back. The thought was dangerous. It implied Kale Draven was more than the cold, calculated man he presented to the world, that underneath the ice was something worth reaching for. Alara rolled over, punching her pillow into submission. She wasn't here to save him, wasn't here to thaw his frozen heart like some fairy tale princess. She was here to survive, to claim what was hers, and if Kale Draven got in her way, she'd go through him. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Alara was having breakfast in the morning room, alone as usual, when Mrs. Brennan appeared with a silver tray bearing a single envelope. This arrived for you, Your Grace. Hand-delivered. The paper was expensive, cream-colored. The handwriting on the front was elegant, old-fashioned, no return address. Alara opened it carefully. Duchess Draven, the Ladies' Auxiliary of Saint. Margaret's requests the honor of your presence at our monthly luncheon this Thursday. We understand you're newly arrived to the county and would be delighted to welcome you to our little society. With warm regards, Lady Helena Ashford. Alara read it twice, hearing the subtext loud and clear. This wasn't a welcome. It was a summons. The local aristocracy gathering to inspect the newcomer. Judge her. Decide if she was worthy of the title she'd bought. Trouble? Mrs. Brennan asked. Opportunity? Alara corrected. She set down the invitation. Tell me about Lady Ashford. Oldest family in the county, widowed young, very influential in social circles. And the ladies' auxiliary? The social engine of the region. If they accept you, doors open. If they don't, Mrs. Brennan trailed off delicately. I'm shut out. Essentially, yes. Alara tapped the invitation against her palm. This was exactly the kind of test she'd been expecting, the kind that could make or break her position here. I'll need a dress, she said. Something that says Duchess without screaming new money. Can you help with that? For the first time since they'd met, Mrs. Brennan smiled. Actually smiled. It would be my pleasure, Your Grace. Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth, and Alara's nerves pulled tight as wire. The luncheon was being held at Ashford House, a sprawling estate that made Draven Manor look almost modest. Alara arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem desperate, not late enough to appear rude, in a dove-gray dress that Mrs. Brennan had assured her struck exactly the right note. A footman ushered her into a sun-filled conservatory where a dozen women were already gathered, their conversation pausing as she entered. Duchess Draven? Lady Ashford glided forward, all practiced warmth and assessing eyes. How wonderful that you could join us. Lady Ashford, thank you for the invitation. Please, call me Helena. We're very informal here. Which was, of course, a complete lie. Let me introduce you to everyone. The next 20 minutes were a blur of names and faces and subtle little tests. Who she knew, where she'd been educated, what her father did. Each question designed to place her, categorize her, determine her value. Alara answered with careful honesty, letting them see exactly enough. Yes, her father was in shipping. Yes, it was new money. No, she hadn't been presented at court. But she'd been educated in Switzerland, spoke 3 languages, and could discuss art and literature with enough knowledge to prove she wasn't just a checkbook with a pretty face. By the time they sat down to lunch, Alara could feel the group dividing. Half were already writing her off as an interloper. The other half were at least curious. Tell us about the Duke, said a woman named Margaret Southwell, stirring sugar into her tea. We've all been dying to know how the great Cale Draven was finally caught. The phrasing was deliberately provocative. Alara felt every eye turned to her, waiting. I'm not sure anyone catches Cale Draven, she said lightly. I think at best you negotiate a temporary alliance. Several women laughed. Helena's smile sharpened with interest. How diplomatic, Margaret pressed. But surely there's some romance to the story, some grand gesture? If there were, I'd tell you. But the truth is far more practical. Alara met her gaze directly. We're partners in a business arrangement. I think that's healthier than pretending otherwise. The table went very quiet. How modern, Helena said finally. Honest? Alara corrected. I think marriage works better when both people know what they're getting, don't you? It was a gamble. She could see it playing out in their faces, half shocked by her candor, half grudgingly impressed. Then Helena laughed. Actually laughed. You know, I think I like you, she said. Most new wives show up here pretending they married for love while everyone knows they married for money. At least you're honest about it. I try to be. Good. Honesty is in short supply in our circles. Helena raised her glass. To the new Duchess. May she bring some fresh air to this stuffy county. The toast was echoed around the table, and Alara felt something shift. Not acceptance exactly, but the beginning of it. She'd passed the first test. The rest of the luncheon went smoothly enough. Alara found herself genuinely enjoying some of the conversations, particularly with a sharp-witted woman named Caroline Winters, who had opinions on everything from politics to horticultural societies. But as the afternoon wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't until she was preparing to leave that she understood why. Duchess Draven. A woman she hadn't been introduced to stepped into her path, younger than most of the others, with auburn hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I don't believe we've met. I'm Sarah Crane. Crane, as in Lissa's sister, the woman confirmed. I wanted to say hello. My sister speaks of you so fondly. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. How kind of her, Alara said evenly. She mentioned you two had tea recently, said it was very enlightening. Around them, conversation had died. Everyone was listening now, pretending not to. It was brief, Alara said. I'm afraid I had other appointments. Of course. You must be so busy. Learning to run such a large household, managing the staff, trying to figure out where you fit. Sarah's smile widened. It must be challenging, being so new to everything. The title, the responsibilities, the expectations. The message was clear. You don't belong here. Alara felt every eye on her. This was another test, she realized. More direct than the others, but still a test. How would the new Duchess handle open hostility? She could back down, make peace, play it safe, or she could fight. You're absolutely right, Alara said pleasantly. It is challenging. Learning a new role always is. But I found the staff remarkably helpful, and the estate, while large, is surprisingly well organized. She paused. Though I'm curious, you seem very familiar with the operations at Draven Manor. Do you visit often? Sarah's smile froze. I've been a guest there many times over the years, she said stiffly. How lovely. Well, you'll have to come by again soon, as a guest, of course. I'll have Mrs. Brennan send an invitation. Alara's tone was warmth itself. I do like to keep track of who has access to my home. The emphasis on my was delicate but deliberate. Sarah's face flushed. I'm sure that won't be necessary. Oh, but I insist. We should be formal about these things, don't you think? Proper protocol and all that. Alara glanced around at the watching women. After all, as you said, I'm still learning the expectations. I'd hate to let just anyone wander through. Helena made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Sarah opened her mouth, closed it, then turned sharply and walked away. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds before conversation erupted, quieter than before, charged with new energy. Alara had just drawn a line in the sand in front of the entire local aristocracy, and she'd done it without raising her voice or losing her smile. Well, Helena said, appearing at her elbow, that was entertaining. Was it? Very. The Crane sisters aren't used to being challenged, especially not in public. Helena studied her with open curiosity. You're either very brave or very foolish. Can't I be both? Helena laughed. I think we're going to be friends, Duchess Draven. Alara, she said. Please call me Alara. Alara, then, welcome to the county. I suspect you're going to make things much more interesting. Alara returned to Draven Manor as the sun was setting, her head spinning with the day's events. She'd made allies, made enemies, drawn battle lines, and for the first time since arriving at this cold, beautiful prison of a house, she felt like she was actually fighting instead of just surviving. Mrs. Brennan met her at the entrance, looking pleased. How did it go, Your Grace? I think I may have started a war. Good. It's about time someone did. Alara laughed, surprising herself. Is the Duke home? In his study. He asked not to be disturbed. Of course he did. Alara climbed the stairs to her chambers, let Margot help her out of the gray dress, and changed into something more comfortable. Then, instead of staying in her room like a good, obedient wife, she walked directly to Kael's study and knocked. I said I didn't want to be disturbed, came his voice from inside. It's me. A pause. Then, come in. Kael was behind his desk, surrounded by papers. He looked tired, she thought, more tired than she'd seen him. I attended the ladies' auxiliary luncheon today, Alara said without preamble. I heard. Helena Ashford sent a note. Kael set down his pen. She said you made quite an impression. Did she say good or bad? She said interesting. From Helena, that's high praise. Alara moved further into the room, noting the brandy on his desk, the shadows under his eyes. I met Sarah Crane there, Lissa's sister. Something shifted in Kael's expression. Did you? She made it very clear that I'm not welcome in certain circles, that the Crane family has significant influence here. Alara met his gaze steadily. I made it very clear that I don't care. Kael leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're making enemies. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Enemies are people who want to destroy you. People who don't respect your boundaries are just people who haven't been taught better yet. For a long moment, Kale just looked at her. Then, incredibly, he almost smiled. Actually, almost smiled. You're not what I expected, he said. Neither are you. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone colder, maybe. More cruel. She shrugged. You're just absent, which is somehow worse. The almost smile faded. This is what you agreed to. I agreed to a marriage, not a haunting. Bain sepa sautane motum. Alara stepped closer to his desk. You don't have to love me, KL. I'm not asking for that. But this house has 200 rooms and you still can't seem to be in the same one as me for more than 10 minutes. At some point, that stops being practical and starts being cowardice. His eyes flashed. Careful. Why? You wanted honesty. Business partnerships require communication. So let's communicate. She planted her hands on his desk, leaning forward. What do you want from this marriage? Really? I want my estate solvent, my name restored, my life back in order. And me? Where do I fit in that neat little plan? You don't, Kyle said bluntly. You're a means to an end. I thought I'd made that clear. You have, repeatedly. Alara straightened. But here's what you haven't made clear. What happens when I stop being convenient? When I start demanding space and attention and actual partnership? Do you just lock me in a tower somewhere and forget I exist? Don't be dramatic. I'm being realistic. You can't build a life on avoidance, Kale. Eventually, something breaks. Is that what you think is happening? Something's breaking? I think it never had a chance to form in the first place. Alara turned toward the door. But for what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere. You married me for my money and my connections. Fine. I'm using both to establish myself here. To build something. With or without you. She was almost to the door when his voice stopped her. Alara. She turned. Kyle was standing now, his expression unreadable. You handled Sarah Crane well. Helena was impressed. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm just stating a fact. He paused. But for what it's worth, you're right about the East Wing repairs. I should have approved them earlier. It wasn't an apology, but from Kale Draven, it might be the closest thing to one she'd ever get. The roof's already fixed, Alara said softly. The contractor finished yesterday. Something flickered across Kale's face. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Good, he said finally. They stood there in the lamplight, two people who'd bound themselves together without really knowing why, and Alara felt the first fragile thread of something that wasn't quite alliance but wasn't quite warfare either. It was a start. She left him there, surrounded by his papers and his brandy, and walked back to her chambers feeling like she'd won something small but significant. The battle for Draven Manor had begun, and Alara Draven now, had every intention of winning. The estate needed her whether Kyle Draven admitted it or not. Alara discovered this truth gradually over the following weeks, moving through the manor like water finding cracks in stone. The servants responded to her in ways they never had with Kyle, not out of fear but something closer to relief, as if they'd been waiting years for someone to actually notice them. The south pasture fence is down again, Thomas, the groundskeeper told her one morning. He was a weathered man in his 60s who'd worked the land since Kyle's father's time. Been telling the Duke for 3 months. Livestock keeps getting out. Show me, Alara said. They walked the property line together, Thomas pointing out problems that had festered like untreated wounds, rotting fence posts, drainage issues flooding the lower fields, a tenant cottage with a chimney so damaged it was a miracle the family hadn't died of smoke inhalation. Why hasn't the Duke addressed any of this? Alara asked. Thomas shrugged, uncomfortable. He's got his mind on other things. Your Grace, London business, the estate finances. He sees the numbers, not the land. Well, I see the land. Get me estimates for everything that needs fixing. I want it all documented. All of it? That'll be a hefty list. Good. I like being thorough. By the end of her second month at Draven Manor, Alara had become something Kyle clearly hadn't anticipated. Present. She wasn't content to be a decorative addition to the household. She attended tenant meetings, reviewed crop yields, questioned why certain traditions were maintained when they made no practical sense. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began changing things. The leaking roof was just the beginning. She authorized repairs to the tenant cottages, increased wages for the lower staff who'd been working at the same rate for a decade, reorganized the household budget to eliminate waste while improving conditions. Mrs. Brennan became her unlikely ally in all of it. "The Duke won't like this," the housekeeper warned as they reviewed the revised budget. "He's very particular about how money is spent." "The Duke married me for my money," Ilara said. "I'm spending it. If he has objections, he can discuss them with me directly." But Kyle didn't discuss anything directly. He simply wasn't there. London called him away more often than not. Business meetings, he said. Estate matters that required his attention. Ilara didn't ask if those estate matters had blonde hair and a venomous smile. She already knew. What surprised her was how little it hurt after a while. The rejection had become routine, almost comfortable in its predictability. Kale left. Ilara stayed. The world kept turning. She threw herself into the estate with an intensity that startled even her. Every morning brought new challenges, new problems to solve. The distraction was welcome, necessary even. It was during one of these deep dives into estate management that she discovered the ledgers. She hadn't been snooping, not exactly. She'd been looking for last year's grain yields in Kael's study when she opened the wrong drawer and found a set of books that didn't match the official accounts. Ilara pulled them out carefully, her heart beginning to pound. The numbers inside told a story Kael had been hiding. The estate wasn't just recovering from debt, it was drowning in it. The influx of her family's money had helped, yes, but not enough. There were creditors she'd never heard of, loans taken against property that was supposedly unencumbered, obligations that stretched back years. She was still sitting there, surrounded by evidence of financial catastrophe, when Kael walked in. "What are you doing in my study?" Ilara looked up. He was back from London earlier than expected, still wearing his traveling coat, his expression thunderous. "Looking for the grain yields," she said calmly. "I found something more interesting." Kael's gaze dropped to the ledgers spread across his desk. His jaw tightened. "Those are private." "Private from your wife? The person whose money is currently keeping this estate afloat?" "Put them away, Ilara." "No." She stood, placing her hands on the desk. "You told me this marriage was a business arrangement. Fine, but business partners don't hide the real books from each other. This," she gestured at the ledgers, "this is fraud. It's complicated. It's a disaster. You owe nearly 3 times what you told my father. The estate isn't recovering, it's hemorrhaging." Her voice rose despite her best efforts. "Were you ever going to tell me, or were you just going to keep taking my money until there was nothing left?" Kael moved around the desk with dangerous precision. "You don't understand the full picture." "Then explain it to me." "I don't owe you explanations. You married me under false pretenses. You absolutely owe me an explanation." They were standing close now, close enough that Ilara could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, the way his hands had clenched into fists. He was furious. Good. So was she. "My father made mistakes," Kael said, each word bitten off. "Bad investments. Worse decisions. By the time he died, the estate was already ruined. I've spent the last 8 years trying to rebuild it." "By lying?" "By surviving." His eyes flashed. "Do you have any idea what it's like watching everything your family built for generations crumble because of one man's stupidity? I did what I had to do." "Including marrying me." "Yes, including that." The honesty of it hit harder than she'd expected. She'd known, of course. But hearing him say it so bluntly, with no attempt at softening— "Get out," Ilara said quietly. Kael blinked. "What?" "This is your study. I'm leaving, but we're not done discussing this." "There's nothing to discuss." "There's everything to discuss. This is my money propping up your failing estate. That makes it my business." She moved toward the door, then stopped. "And Kael, if you ever hide something like this from me again, I'll stop every single payment. Let's see how your creditors feel about that. She left before he could respond, her hands shaking with anger and something else. Hurt, maybe, which was stupid. She'd known what this was from the beginning. But knowing something and seeing the proof laid out in stark numbers were two different things. The next morning, Kyle was gone again. Back to London, according to Mrs. Brennan. No note, no explanation. Fine. Alara turned her attention to the parts of her life she could actually control. The estate, the staff, the community that was slowly, cautiously beginning to accept her. It was Helena Ashford who gave her the next opportunity. We're having a gathering next week, Helena said during one of their now regular afternoon teas. Nothing too formal, just the key families in the county. I'd like you to attend. Of course. And I'd like you to bring the Duke. Alara's teacup paused halfway to her lips. Kyle doesn't really do social gatherings, which is precisely why he needs to attend this one. Helena's expression was shrewd. People are talking, Alara, about the new Duchess who runs the estate while her husband hides in London, about what that means, what it looks like. It looks like what it is, a marriage of convenience. It looks like weakness, and in our circles, weakness is blood in the water. Helena leaned forward. I'm on your side, but you need to understand there are people who want to see you fail, who resent your new money and your influence. If you and Kyle don't present a united front, they'll tear you apart. Kyle won't come. Make him. Alara laughed bitterly. You don't know my husband. I know men like him, proud, stubborn, convinced they can handle everything alone. Helena smiled. They're all the same. You just have to find the right leverage. The gathering was scheduled for Saturday evening. Alara had 5 days to convince Kyle to attend something he'd rather die than participate in. She spent those 5 days making his life systematically uncomfortable. First, she canceled his usual London accommodations. When he called to complain, she was sweetly apologetic. Oh, did you need those? I assumed since you weren't discussing travel plans with me, they weren't important. Then she redirected all correspondence about estate business to her own desk. When creditors called, she was the one who answered. The Duke is unavailable. I handle all financial matters now. Yes, I'm aware of the outstanding payments. We'll get to them when we get to them. By Wednesday, Kyle showed up at the manor in a fury. What the hell are you doing? He demanded, storming into the morning room where Alara was calmly reviewing grain contracts. Managing the estate. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted you to manage the household, not hijack my entire operation. Your operation was drowning. I'm trying to save it. Alara set down her pen. Also, we have a social engagement Saturday evening, Helena Ashford's gathering. No, it wasn't a question. I don't do social gatherings. You do now. We're married. That means occasionally pretending we can stand to be in the same room for more than 10 minutes. She smiled pleasantly. Consider it part of our business arrangement. Kael's expression darkened. You're trying to manipulate me. I'm trying to protect both our interests. There's a difference. Alara stood, smoothing her skirt. Helena says people are talking about how the new Duchess runs things while her husband disappears, about what that means for the Draven name. I don't care what people say. Maybe you should, because the same people who are gossiping about us are the same people who hold your debts, and if they decide you're weak, they'll call those debts in. She moved closer. Like it or not, we're in this together, so you can either work with me or watch everything you've been trying to save crumble anyway. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Fine, Kyle said finally. One evening. But after this, you stay out of my business. After this, we'll see. Saturday came too quickly. Alara dressed with unusual care, choosing a deep emerald gown that Mrs. Brennan swore made her look dangerous, which felt appropriate, given what she was about to walk into. Kyle met her at the base of the grand staircase, looking sharp in black evening wear. He was handsome, she supposed, if you like the cold remote type. You clean up well, she said. Don't. Don't what? Don't try to make this pleasant. We're playing a role. Let's just get it over with. The ride to Ashford House was silent and tense. Kale stared out the window while Ilara reviewed her mental notes about who would be there, what alliances mattered, where the dangers lay. She didn't expect to see Lissa Crane in the receiving line. But there she was, blonde and perfect in pale blue silk, standing next to Helena like she'd been invited. Which she had been, obviously. Helena was too smart to exclude someone that influential, even if she was personally vicious. "Duchess Draven," Lissa purred as they approached, "and the Duke, how rare to see you both together." "Lady Crane." Alara's voice was ice wrapped in velvet. "What a surprise." "Is it? Helena and I are old friends." Lissa's gaze slid to Kyle. "Darling, you look tired. London must be exhausting." Kale's expression didn't change. "Lissa." Just her name. Nothing else. But something passed between them, some understanding or history that Ilara wasn't part of, and she felt her stomach twist. This was going to be worse than she'd thought. The gathering was held in Ashford's ballroom, a space that could have housed a small army. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over maybe 60 people, all of them dressed in their finest, all of them watching as Ilara and Kyle entered. "Smile," Ilara murmured. "We're supposed to look united, remember?" Kale's hand found the small of her back, a gesture so unexpected she almost flinched. But his touch was perfunctory, performative, nothing more than what the role required. They moved through the crowd together, accepting congratulations and thinly veiled assessments. Ilara could feel the weight of every gaze, every whispered conversation that stopped when they approached. This was a test, not just of her, but of them. Duchess? A man she vaguely recognized, Lord Pemberton, maybe, stepped into their path. "I hear you've been making changes at the estate. Quite progressive of you." "Progress is necessary when systems are broken," Ilara said smoothly. "Some might say the old systems worked fine. Some might be wrong." Pemberton's eyes narrowed. Before he could respond, Kyle's hand tightened slightly at her back. "If you'll excuse us," Kyle said, his tone brooking no argument. He steered Ilara away before Pemberton could continue. "You don't have to defend me," Ilara said once they were out of earshot. "I wasn't defending you. I was preventing a scene." "Arson." But there was something in his voice that wasn't quite as cold as usual. They made it through cocktails and into dinner without major incident. Ilara found herself seated between Caroline Winters, who was mercifully good company, and a young lord who spent the entire first course explaining his hunting exploits in excruciating detail. Kale was across the table, next to Lissa. Ilara tried not to watch them. Failed. Lissa was leaning close, saying something that made Kyle's expression tighten. Her hand rested on his arm with casual possession. Every gesture screamed intimacy, history, ownership, and Kale wasn't pulling away. "Don't let her get to you," Caroline murmured beside her. "That's what she wants." "I'm not—" "You are. Everyone is watching you watch them. It's quite the show." Ilara forced her attention back to her plate. Caroline was right. This was exactly what Lissa wanted. To rattle her, make her react, prove that the new Duchess was nothing more than a jealous wife. She wouldn't give her the satisfaction. After dinner came dancing. Ilara had been dreading this part. The expectation that she and Kyle would take the floor together, demonstrate their partnership for all to see. But when the music started, Kyle was nowhere to be found. Ilara stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching couples pair off, feeling increasingly conspicuous. Where the hell had he gone? Looking for someone? Lissa appeared beside her, champagne in hand. Kale stepped out, something about needing air. How convenient that you noticed. I always notice where Kale is. Lissa's smile was sharp. It's a habit from when we actually had a relationship. Not this cold arrangement you two pretend is a marriage. Careful, Ilara said softly. Your jealousy is showing. Jealousy? Lissa laughed. Of what? A title? I could have had that if I wanted it. Kyle asked me first, before you. The words hit like a physical blow. Ilara kept her expression neutral through sheer force of will. Did he? Oh yes, we were supposed to marry, but I refused. I didn't want to be trapped in a loveless arrangement just to save his precious estate. Lissa leaned closer, her perfume cloying. So he went looking for someone desperate enough to say yes. Someone new money and naive. Someone like you. Laura's fingers tightened on her champagne flute. Are you finished? Not quite. I just wanted you to understand something. Lissa's voice dropped. Kael will never love you. He can't. That part of him belongs to me. You're just a transaction that walked and talked. And the sooner you accept that, the less this will hurt. She walked away before Alara could respond, leaving her standing alone at the edge of the dance floor with those words echoing in her head. He asked her first. Alara made her way through the crowd, looking for an exit, needing air herself. She found a side door that led to a terrace overlooking the gardens. Kael was there, leaning against the stone balustrade, staring at nothing. There you are, Alara said. He turned. Here I am. We're supposed to be dancing, presenting a united front, remember? I needed a break from the performance. Must be exhausting, Alara said, walking closer. Pretending to care about your wife for a whole evening. Kael's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Lissa told me something interesting about how you asked her to marry you first, before me. The silence that followed confirmed it. It's true, Alara said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was years ago. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. You never mentioned that your first choice turned you down. Because it's not relevant. Not relevant. Alara laughed, the sound bitter. I'm your second choice, Kael. Your backup plan when the woman you actually wanted said no. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning? What difference would it have made? You knew what this was, a business arrangement. I knew it wasn't love. I didn't know I was competing with a ghost. She moved closer, anger building. How am I supposed to establish any kind of partnership with you when you're still in love with someone else? I'm not. Kael stopped, looked away, and that pause said everything. You are, Alara said. You're still in love with her. It's complicated. It's pathetic. The words came out harsher than she'd intended, but she couldn't stop them. You're so caught up in what you can't have that you can't see what's right in front of you. I'm not asking for love, Kael. I'm asking for basic respect, partnership. And you can't even give me that because you're too busy pining for a woman who didn't want you. Kael's head snapped around, his eyes blazing. You don't know anything about it. Then tell me. Explain it. Help me understand why you're willing to sabotage everything. The estate, this marriage, your own future, just to hold on to some fantasy of what could have been. For a moment, she thought he might actually answer, might actually let her see past the ice. Then the door behind them opened. There you are. Lissa stepped onto the terrace, her timing so perfect it had to be deliberate. People are asking where the happy couple disappeared to. She looked between them, reading the tension like a book. Did I interrupt something? She smiled. How rude of me. Alara made a decision in that moment. A tactical one, born of fury and wounded pride and the absolute certainty that if she didn't act now, she'd lose whatever small ground she'd gained. She turned to Kael, placed her hand on his chest, and said, Dance with me. Kael stared at her. What? You heard me. We're going back in there, and we're going to dance. And we're going to look like we can tolerate each other for more than 5 minutes. She met his gaze steadily. Or you can stay out here with your past and watch your future crumble. Lissa's smile faltered. Kael's jaw tightened. For a terrible moment, Alara thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd choose Lissa right there, in front of her, and make her humiliation complete. Then he offered his arm. Lead the way. They walked back into the ballroom together, leaving Lissa standing alone on the terrace. The music was already playing, a waltz, slow and deliberate. Kael pulled Alara into the proper frame, his hand at her waist, hers on his shoulder. They began to move, and Alara was surprised to discover he was an excellent dancer. I didn't know you could do this, she said quietly. There's a lot you don't know about me. Whose fault is that? He didn't answer. They turned, moving through the other couples with practiced ease. Around them, conversations had died. Everyone was watching now. They're staring, Kael murmured. Let them. You're enjoying this. I'm surviving this, There's a difference. Alara looked up at him. But yes, watching Lissa's face when we walked past was deeply satisfying. Something flickered in Kael's eyes, almost like amusement. You really don't like her. She's been systematically trying to destroy me since the day we married. So no, I'm not her biggest fan. The music swelled. Kael pulled her slightly closer, still proper, but enough that she could feel the warmth of him through the layers of fabric. She told you about our past, he said. Yes. What did she say? That you loved her, that you asked her to marry you, that she said no because she didn't want a loveless arrangement. Alara met his gaze. Is that accurate? The facts are correct. The interpretation is not. Meaning? Kael was quiet for a long moment, navigating a turn before answering. I asked her to marry me because I thought that's what you did when you'd been with someone for 5 years. Because I was 24 and stupid and thought marriage would fix things between us. And when she said no, I was relieved. He said it so quietly she almost missed it, which told me everything I needed to know. Alara blinked. You were relieved? Lissa and I were never right for each other. We were just familiar, comfortable. She represented a life I thought I was supposed to want. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. But when she turned me down, I realized I'd been trying to force something that was never going to work. Then why do you still see her? I don't. Not the way you think. She visits you in London. Kael's expression hardened. She visits London. I happen to be there. It's not the same thing. But you don't tell her to stay away. No? Why not? The music was ending. Kael pulled them to a stop, his hand still at her waist, their faces close enough that she could see flecks of gray in his blue eyes. Because I'm a coward, he said simply. Before Alara could respond, applause broke out around them. The dance had ended. They were standing in the center of the floor, surrounded by watching eyes, and Kael was looking at her like he'd just admitted something he'd never said out loud before. Then he stepped back, the moment breaking like glass. Thank you for the dance, he said formally, and walked away. Alara stood there, her heart pounding, unsure what had just happened. Around her, the crowd was already moving, forming new dance pairs, the spectacle over. But Helena appeared at her elbow, looking pleased. Well, she said. That was convincing. Was it? Very. You two looked almost real. Almost. The words stuck like a thorn. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Alara smiled and made conversation and pretended her world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Kael stayed on the opposite side of the room, avoiding her with the same precision he'd used to dance with her. It was nearly midnight when they finally left. The carriage ride home was silent again, but different this time, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Thank you, Alara said as they approached the manor. For tonight, for the dance. Kael nodded, not looking at her. What you said, about being relieved when Lissa said no. Did you mean it? Yes. But you still love her? No. Kael turned to face her finally. I don't. I haven't for a long time, but that doesn't mean I know how to let go of the idea of her. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. The carriage stopped. Kael climbed out first, then offered his hand to help Alara down. His grip was warm, solid. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. This marriage, this partnership, I've spent 8 years rebuilding the estate alone. I don't know how to let someone else in. Then learn, Alara said, because I'm not going anywhere, and I'm tired of being treated like an intruder in my own life. She pulled her hand from his and walked into the manor without looking back. That night, Alara didn't sleep. She paced her chambers instead, replaying every moment of the evening. Kael's admission on the terrace, the way he'd looked at her during that dance, his quiet confession in the carriage. I don't know how to let someone else in. The honesty of it had cracked something open inside her, something dangerous. Because despite everything, the coldness, the rejection, the whole mess with Lissa, she was starting to care. Not love, she wasn't that foolish, but something sharper than indifference had taken root, and she didn't know what to do with it. 3 days passed. Kael disappeared again, though this time he left a note. Brief, clinical. Business in London. Back Friday. Alara threw herself into estate work with renewed intensity. There were tenant disputes to mediate, harvest preparations to oversee, 1,000 small decisions that apparently no one had been making for years. She was in the estate office Thursday afternoon, reviewing contracts with Thomas, when Mrs. Brennan appeared looking flustered. "Your Grace, there's a messenger here, from your father's house." Alara's stomach dropped. Her father never sent messengers. He wrote letters, made phone calls. Messengers meant urgency. The young man waiting in the entrance hall was pale, wringing his cap between nervous hands. "Duchess Draven, I'm to tell you, your father's been taken ill, very ill. The doctors say—" He swallowed hard. "They say you should come quickly." The world tilted. "How ill?" "They're calling it a stroke, ma'am. He collapsed yesterday. They've been trying to stabilize him, but—" Alara didn't hear the rest. She was already moving, her mind racing through logistics. The journey would take 6 hours by train. She needed to pack, needed to— "I'm coming with you." She turned. Kyle stood in the doorway to his study, still in his shirt sleeves, looking like he'd just arrived home. "You're supposed to be in London," Alara said stupidly. "I came back early. I heard." He moved toward her with purpose. "When do we leave?" "We? You think I'm letting you travel alone? In this state?" "I'm fine." "You're shaking." Cale's voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. "Go pack. I'll arrange the carriage and send word ahead that we're coming. We can catch the evening train if we hurry." Alara wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle this herself. But the truth was, she was terrified. Her father, loud, brash, impossible to imagine as anything but invincible, was dying. And she couldn't do this alone. "Thank you," she whispered. Something shifted in Kyle's expression. "Go. I'll take care of everything." The journey was a blur of motion and mounting dread. They caught the train with minutes to spare, settling into a private compartment as the countryside blurred past the windows. Kyle sat across from her, saying nothing. But his presence was solid, grounding. When her hand started shaking again somewhere past the second hour, he reached across and took one of them in his, just held it. No words, no platitudes. It was the kindest thing he'd ever done. They arrived at her father's estate near midnight. The house was ablaze with light, every window glowing like it was fighting against the darkness. A bad sign. Houses only looked like that when death was circling. The butler, old Jenkins, who'd known Alara since childhood, met them at the door with red-rimmed eyes. "Miss Alara, he's been asking for you." "How is he?" Jenkins shook his head slowly. Alara's mother was waiting in the corridor outside her father's chambers. She looked small, diminished in a way Alara had never seen. When she saw Alara, her composure crumpled. "Oh, thank heaven. I didn't know if you'd make it in time." "What happened?" "He was at breakfast, just having breakfast, and then he couldn't move his left side. Couldn't speak properly." Her mother's voice broke. "The doctors say the damage is extensive. They're not sure if—" She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Alara felt Kyle's hand at the small of her back. Steady, supporting. "Can I see him?" she asked. "He's been drifting in and out, but yes, go." The room smelled of medicine and something else. Something final. Her father lay in the massive bed that had always seemed too small for his personality, looking wrong. Too still. Too quiet. His eyes opened as she approached, tracking her movement with effort. "Alara." The word was slurred, painful to hear. "You came." "Of course I came." She took his hand, the right one, the one that still worked. "How are you feeling?" A ghost of his usual laugh. "Like hell, but I've been worse." "When?" "Give me a minute. I'll think of something." Despite everything, Alara smiled. Even dying, her father was still himself. His gaze shifted to Kyle, standing just inside the doorway. "You brought your husband. Good. Wanted to talk to him anyway." "Father, don't strain yourself." "I'm dying, girl. Let me say what I need to say." He focused on Kyle with surprising intensity. "You take care of her, you hear me? She's worth 10 of you. Don't forget that." Kyle moved closer, his expression unreadable. "I know." "Do you?" Her father's working hand tightened on Alara's. Because, from what I hear, you've been treating my daughter like an inconvenience, like something to be managed. Father, let me finish. He coughed, the sound rattling. I made mistakes in my life, plenty of them, but the biggest was thinking business and family could be separated, thinking transactions mattered more than people. His eyes locked on Kael's. I sold my daughter to save your estate. We both know that. But you could choose to make it more. You could choose her. The silence that followed was suffocating. I'll do my best, sir, Kael said quietly. Your best better be damn good. Her father's breathing was getting labored. Alara, come closer. She leaned in, and he whispered something only she could hear, words that made her throat tight and her eyes burn. I'm proud of you. Always have been, even when I was too stupid to say it. I know, Papa. You're stronger than me, smarter. You'll be fine without me. Don't say that. It's true. You were always going to outlast me. His smile was weak but genuine. Just promise me something. Anything. Don't let anyone make you small. Not that husband of yours, not society, not even yourself. His grip tightened fractionally. Be big. Be impossible. Be everything I raised you to be. Alara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Her father closed his eyes, exhaustion claiming him. Within minutes, his breathing had evened into something that might have been sleep. The doctor appeared, checked his vitals with practiced efficiency, then pulled Alara and her mother aside. The next 24 hours are critical. If he makes it through tonight, he might have a few more days, but the doctor's expression said what he couldn't. You should prepare yourselves. Alara's mother made a small, broken sound. We'll stay, Alara said, as long as it takes. The night stretched into eternity. Alara sat in a chair beside her father's bed, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest, while Kael disappeared to make arrangements. Rooms for them, messages to be sent, all the practical details that someone needed to handle. Around 3 a.m, her father woke again. This time, his gaze was unfocused, distant. Catherine, he said, looking at Alara, her mother's name. It's me, Papa. It's Alara. But he was somewhere else, lost in memory or fever. Catherine, I should have told you about the business, about the risks. I should have been honest. Alara's mother appeared on the other side of the bed, taking his left hand even though he couldn't feel it. I'm here, darling. I know, it's all right. It's not all right. I ruined us, gambled everything on that shipping contract and lost. His words were running together now, urgent and confused. The estate's gone. Everything's gone. I'm so sorry. Alara's blood ran cold. What shipping contract? But her father wasn't hearing her anymore. He was trapped in some past moment, reliving old disasters. Her mother looked across the bed, her face stricken. Not now, Alara, please. Mother, what is he talking about? I said not now. But Kael had appeared in the doorway, and something in his expression said he'd heard, understood. Alara followed him into the corridor, her heart pounding. Did you know? Know what? That my father's fortune isn't secure. That he gambled it away on some failed contract. Well, Kael's silence was answer enough. How long have you known? Alara demanded. I didn't know the details, but I knew the shipping business had suffered losses. And you didn't tell me. It wasn't my place. We're married. We're supposedly partners, and you hid this from me the same way you hid the estate's real debts. Her voice was rising. Is everyone in my life just lying to me constantly? Alara? No, I'm done. Done with secrets and half-truths, and everyone deciding what I'm allowed to know. She pressed her palms to her eyes, fighting back tears of exhaustion and fury. My father's dying, and I'm finding out now, right now, that everything I thought I knew about my family's finances was a lie. Kael moved closer, his voice low. This isn't the time. When is the time, Kael? When else am I supposed to fall apart? Should I schedule it for later? Pencil in a breakdown between funeral arrangements and estate management? You're exhausted. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. for the first time in months. She met his gaze. Everyone keeps treating me like I'm fragile, like I can't handle reality. But I'm not the one hiding. I'm not the one running away to London every time things get difficult. That's you. The words hit their mark. Cale's jaw tightened. You want honesty? He said quietly. Fine. Yes, I knew your father's business was struggling. Yes, I should have told you. But I didn't because I thought you had enough to deal with without knowing your inheritance was as unstable as my estate. That's not your decision to make. No, it's not. And I was wrong. He ran a hand through his hair, looking more rattled than she'd ever seen him. But I was trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need partnership. I need someone who trusts me enough to tell me the truth, even when it's ugly. Then here's an ugly truth. Cale's voice dropped. I don't know how to be what you need. I've spent 8 years alone, building walls, keeping people out because it was safer than letting them in. And now you're here demanding I tear those walls down. And I don't know if I can. The rawness of it stunned her into silence. But I'm trying, Kyle continued. That's why I came with you tonight. Why I'm here instead of running back to London like I want to. Because you're right. I do run. It's what I do when things get too real, too complicated. But you deserve better than that. Alara stared at him, this man she'd married without knowing, who was suddenly showing her pieces of himself she'd never suspected existed. Then stop running, she whispered. Before he could respond, her mother appeared in the doorway, ashen-faced. Alara, come quickly. They rushed back into the room. Her father's breathing had changed, shallow, irregular. The death rattle, people called it. Alara had heard the term before but never understood how terrifyingly accurate it was. She took her father's hand again, her mother on the other side, and Kyle stepped back to give them space. But he didn't leave, just stood there, silent witness to the end of a life. Her father opened his eyes one last time, looked at Alara with sudden clarity. Be big, he whispered, and then he was gone. The days that followed were mechanical, funeral arrangements, estate lawyers, an endless stream of people offering condolences that meant nothing. Alara moved through it all like she was underwater, everything muffled and distant. Kale stayed. That was the surprising part. He stayed through the funeral, through the reading of the will, through the aftermath when people finally left and Alara's mother collapsed into grief. You should go back to the manor, Alara told him on the 4th day. The estate needs you. The estate will survive. You need me more. I don't need anyone. Alara. She turned away, staring out the window at the garden she'd played in as a child. Everything looked the same but felt different, like the world had shifted slightly off its axis. The will, she said abruptly. Did you hear what the lawyers said? Some of it. My father left everything to my mother, the house, the business, what's left of the fortune. She laughed bitterly. Which apparently isn't much. He was telling the truth in his delirium. The shipping business is nearly bankrupt. That failed contract wiped out most of the reserves. Kyle was quiet for a long moment. How much is left? Enough to keep my mother comfortable if she's careful. But the payments to your estate, the ones that were supposed to continue annually, they can't. The money's gone. She heard him move closer, but didn't turn. Alara, I don't care about the money. You married me for it. I married you for a lot of reasons I didn't understand at the time. The money was just the excuse. Now she did turn, searching his face. What are you saying? I'm saying that when I thought about coming back to the manor without you, it felt wrong. Empty. His voice was carefully controlled, like he was admitting something that cost him. I'm saying that watching you lose your father made me realize I've been grieving my own losses wrong, hiding from them instead of facing them. Kyle, let me finish. He stepped closer. I don't know how to be a good husband. I don't know how to do this partnership you keep demanding, but I want to try. Not because of money or estates or any practical reason, but because you were right that night in the carriage. I don't know how to let someone in, but I want to learn, with you. The confession hung between them, raw and unpolished. My father died, Alara said, her voice breaking. And all I can think is that I wasted so much time being angry at you, being angry at this marriage, when I could have been, you couldn't have known. Neither could you. She moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. All those walls you built, did they actually protect you, or did they just make you lonely? Cale's expression cracked. Both. Then maybe it's time to tear them down. She reached for him, and he met her halfway. The kiss was nothing like their wedding kiss. This was desperate, searching, two people trying to find something solid in a world that kept shifting. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "I can't promise I won't mess this up," he said. "I can't promise I won't let you. Then we're even." They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other up, before reality intruded in the form of footsteps in the corridor. Alara's mother appeared, looking fragile. "Alara, darling, the lawyers need to speak with you again. Something about the business contracts." The spell broke. Alara stepped back, straightening her dress. "I'll be right there." When her mother left, Kyle caught her hand. "Whatever they say, we'll handle it, together." "Together," Alara repeated, testing the word, liking how it sounded. The lawyer's news was grim. The shipping business had debts Alara hadn't known about. Creditors were already circling. Without immediate capital infusion, the company would collapse within months. "How much would it take to stabilize it?" Alara asked. The head lawyer exchanged glances with his colleague. Conservatively, 50,000 pounds. More realistically, closer to 75. A fortune. Money her mother didn't have. Money Alara didn't have. "And if we let it collapse? Your mother would lose the house. Most of the assets would be seized to cover debts. She'd be left with very little." Alara felt the walls closing in. Her father had built an empire on risks and bravado, and now that empire was crumbling, threatening to take her mother down with it. "Give me 3 days," she said. "I need to review the full accounts, understand what we're dealing with." Back at the manor a week later, Alara threw herself into solving the impossible. She went through her father's business records with forensic precision, looking for anything that could be salvaged, assets that could be sold, contracts that could be renegotiated. But the math kept coming up short. Kyle found her in the library past midnight, surrounded by ledgers and documents. "You need to sleep," he said. "I need to save my mother from poverty." "Not at the cost of your own health." Alara looked up at him, exhaustion making her reckless. "The estate has money now. The debts are manageable. You could loan—" "No." The flatness of the refusal stung. "No?" Cale sat down across from her. "If I loan your mother money, it creates an obligation, a debt between our families. That's not what you want. What I want is for my mother not to lose everything. I know, but there has to be another way." He pulled one of the ledgers toward him, scanning the numbers. "What about selling the shipping business entirely? Getting out before it drags your mother under?" "And leave her with what? The business is her security, her identity. Her identity is killing her finances. That's heartless. That's practical." Kyle's gaze was steady. "Sometimes you have to let go of what's drowning you to survive." The words hit harder than they should have, because he wasn't just talking about the business anymore. "Is that what you did?" Alara asked quietly. "Let go?" "I'm trying to." "And how's that working out?" "Ask me in a year." Despite everything, Alara almost smiled. They worked through the night together, two people who barely knew each other trying to solve problems that felt insurmountable. By dawn, they had a plan. Brutal, but effective. Sell the shipping business to a competitor, use the proceeds to settle the debts, and set up a trust for Alara's mother. It wouldn't be the fortune she was used to, but it would be stable, safe. "She'll hate it," Alara said. "Probably, but she'll survive." When Alara presented the plan to her mother 3 days later, the reaction was exactly what she'd expected. "Sell the business? Your father built that company from nothing. And now it's destroying itself. Mother, the debts are too large. If we don't act now, you'll lose everything." "I'd rather lose everything than betray your father's legacy." "His legacy is you, safe, cared for." Alara knelt beside her mother's chair. "Please, let me do this. Let me protect you the way he would have wanted. Her mother's resistance crumbled. She wept, harsh, broken sobs that tore at Alara's heart. But eventually, she agreed. The sale took 2 weeks to finalize. 2 weeks of negotiations and lawyers and watching pieces of her father's life get parceled out to strangers. It was brutal, necessary, and by the end of it, Alara felt hollowed out. But her mother was safe. The debts were settled, and Alara could finally breathe. She returned to Draven Manor on a gray afternoon, exhausted to her bones. Kyle met her at the entrance and, without a word, pulled her into his arms. "It's done," she said into his chest. "I know, you did well." "It doesn't feel like it." "It never does, but you saved her. That's what matters." They stood there in the entrance hall, holding each other, until Mrs. Brennan discreetly cleared her throat. "Your Grace, there's someone here to see you. She's waiting in the front salon." Alara pulled back. "Who?" "Lady Crane." Of course, because the universe had a sixth sense of timing. Lissa was examining a painting when Alara walked in, looking perfectly composed in a burgundy dress that probably cost more than most people earned in 6 months. "Alara, I heard about your father. My condolences." "Thank you." Alara's voice was flat. "Was there something you needed?" "Actually, yes." Lissa turned, her smile sharp. "I wanted to talk to you about KL. I'm not in the mood for games, Lissa. This isn't a game. This is a courtesy." She moved closer. "I know what happened. The money problems. Your father's business collapsing. And I know what that means for this marriage." Alara's stomach tightened. "And what does it mean?" "It means the whole arrangement is falling apart. The money that was supposed to flow annually to the estate, it's gone. Which means Kyle got a title and a wife, but not the financial security he needed." Lissa's eyes glittered. "How long do you think this marriage lasts once he realizes you can't actually save him?" "That's between me and my husband." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're about to become a liability. Dead weight. And Kyle has never been good at carrying unnecessary burdens. Get out. I'm trying to help you, trying to make you see reality before it crushes you." Lissa's voice dropped, falsely sympathetic. "You can't give him what he needs anymore. But I can. I always could." Something inside Alara snapped. The grief, the exhaustion, the weeks of holding everything together while her world fell apart. It all crystallized into pure, cold fury. "You want to know what's real?" she said quietly. "What's real is that Kyle chose me, not you. And every day you show up here, desperate and pathetic, just proves that you can't accept it." Lissa's face flushed. "He doesn't love you." "Maybe not, but he respects me, trusts me, partners with me. Can you say the same?" Alara stepped closer. "You had 5 years with him, 5 years to make him happy. And you failed. So now you're trying to sabotage what we're building because you can't stand that I'm succeeding where you failed." "You think you've won?" Lissa's composure was cracking. "You think one dance, one trip to your dying father changes anything? No, I think weeks of working together, supporting each other, building something real that changes things. But you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Real partnership requires more than pretty dresses and manipulation." "You smug little Lissa." Kale's voice cut through the room like a blade. Both women turned. He stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "How long have you been standing there?" Lissa asked, her voice faltering. "Long enough." He moved into the room with deliberate calm. "You need to leave. Now." "Kale, I was just trying to destroy my marriage. I heard." His gaze was cold enough to freeze. "Did you think I wouldn't? The walls in this house are thin, Lisa, and I've tolerated your presence out of some misguided sense of obligation to the past. But that ends now." Lissa's face went pale. "You can't mean—" "I mean you're no longer welcome here. At the manor, in my life, anywhere near my wife." Each word was precise, final. "What we had is over. It's been over for years. I should have made that clear long ago. But nothing. There is no we. There's you, clinging to something that never existed the way you wanted it to." And there's me, trying to build something real with someone who actually sees me as more than a title and an estate. The silence that followed was devastating. Lissa looked between them, her composure finally shattering. "You'll regret this." "I already regret it. I regret wasting years on someone who only wanted me when she couldn't have me. I regret letting you anywhere near Alara. I regret not doing this months ago." Kale's voice didn't rise, didn't waver. "Now leave, before I have you escorted out." Lissa fled, all dignity abandoned, her heels clicking frantically across the marble. The front door slammed. Silence flooded back. Alara stood frozen, her heart pounding. Kale turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Certainty. "I meant it," he said. Every word. "Kale? I know the money's gone. I know the arrangement has changed, and I don't care." He closed the distance between them. "These past few weeks, working with you, supporting you, it's shown me what this marriage could be, what I want it to be." "And what's that? Real." The word hung in the air, fragile and brave. Alara felt tears burning, but refused to let them fall. "I can't give you what you thought you were getting. The money, the security. I don't want money. I want you. Stubborn, impossible, brilliant you." His hands cupped her face. "I want morning arguments about estate management. I want you challenging every decision I make. I want to build something together that actually matters." "That's not what you signed up for." "Neither did you, but here we are anyway." His thumb brushed her cheek. "So what do you say? Can we start over? Build something real this time?" Alara searched his face, looking for doubt or deception, found only raw honesty. "Yes," she whispered. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like before. This was promise, commitment, two people choosing each other without pretense or protection. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale pressed his forehead to hers. "Fair warning," he said. "I'm going to mess this up, probably repeatedly. I'm counting on it. Gives me something to fight about." He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected, so genuine, that Alara felt something in her chest crack open. They stood there in the front salon, the ghost of Lissa's presence fading, and Alara realized this was what she'd been fighting for all along. Not love, necessarily, but partnership, respect, someone who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. "So what now?" she asked. "Now?" Kael's smile was small but real. "Now we figure out how to actually be married. Together. No more running." "No more secrets?" "No more secrets." It felt like a beginning, fragile but real. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Kale didn't retreat to the East Wing. He followed Alara to her chambers, and when she turned to look at him, uncertain, he simply said, "Is this all right?" She nodded, unable to speak. They undressed in the lamplight, awkward and hesitant. This wasn't about passion or romance. It was about finally, actually choosing to be vulnerable with each other. When Kael pulled her close, his skin warm against hers, Alara felt the last of her defenses crumble. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies the way they'd been learning each other's minds. It wasn't perfect. It was fumbling and honest and real. And afterward, lying in the darkness with Kael's breathing evening out beside her, Alara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. She was drifting towards sleep when a sharp knock jolted her awake. "Your Grace!" Mrs. Brennan's voice was urgent through the door. "Your Grace, I'm sorry, but there's an emergency." Kael was already moving, pulling on his trousers. Alara grabbed a robe. "What is it?" Kael called. "Fire, Your Grace, in the East Wing. It's spreading fast." Alara smelled the smoke before she saw the flames. They raced down the corridor, Kael slightly ahead, Mrs. Brennan following with a lamp. The East Wing was already thick with gray haze, and through the windows Alara could see orange light flickering against the night sky. "How did it start?" Kael demanded. "Don't know, Your Grace." One of the footmen saw smoke coming from the old study. By the time we got there, half the room was ablaze. Dum, They rounded the corner and Alara's breath caught. The entire east corridor was alive with fire, flames crawling up the walls like hungry fingers. Servants were already forming a bucket line, passing water from the nearest pump, but it was woefully inadequate against the inferno. "Get everyone out," Kale ordered. "Account for all the staff. Make sure no one's trapped." Mrs. Brennan rushed off, shouting orders. Kale started toward the fire and Alara grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" "The estate documents are in that study. The deeds, the contracts, everything. You can't go in there." "I have to." He pulled free. "Without those papers, we lose everything. The creditors will tear this place apart." "Kyle." But he was already moving, grabbing a wet cloth from one of the servants and wrapping it around his face. Alara watched him disappear into the smoke and felt her heart seize. She turned to the nearest footman. "Get more water. Organize the line better. We need twice the volume. And someone ride to the village, get help from anyone who can carry a bucket." The young man stared at her. "Now!" she snapped. He ran. Alara moved along the bucket line, redirecting efforts to where the fire was weakest, creating a fire break to stop the spread. Her mind raced through everything she knew about the manor's layout. The east wing was old, dry timber, and ancient tapestries, perfect kindling. But it was also separated from the main house by a stone corridor. If they could contain it there, they might save the rest. "Thomas!" She spotted the groundskeeper. "I need you to soak those tapestries in the stone corridor, drench them. If the fire jumps that gap, we lose the whole manor." "Right away, Your Grace." Margot appeared at her elbow, soot-streaked and terrified. "The Duke, is he went in for the documents. He'll die in there. He's survived worse." Alara hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. "Help me organize the water line. We need constant flow, no gaps." They worked frantically, Alara directing traffic like a general commanding troops. Her nightgown was soaked through and filthy, her lungs burning from smoke, but she kept moving, kept shouting orders, kept watching the corridor where Kyle had disappeared. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The fire was spreading despite their efforts, eating through the east wing with terrifying speed. Alara could hear timbers cracking, the roar of flames consuming everything in their path. "Your Grace, we need to fall back," Thomas called. "It's not safe." "Not yet. The stone corridor. If we can hold that line." A crash from inside made everyone flinch. Part of the ceiling had collapsed. Alara's blood ran cold. Kyle was still in there. She grabbed a wet cloth without thinking, wrapping it around her face. "Your Grace, no!" Mrs. Brennan tried to stop her. "He's my husband." Alara's voice was steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "I'm not leaving him in there." She pushed into the smoke before anyone could argue. The heat hit her like a physical wall. The corridor was a hellscape of fire and falling debris. Alara kept low, one hand on the wall for guidance, calling Kale's name between coughs. "Kale, where are you?" A shape emerged from the smoke. Kale, his arms full of document boxes, his face blackened with soot. "Alara? What the hell are you doing in here?" "Saving you, apparently. Can you walk?" "Yes, but..." "Then move. This whole section's coming down." They stumbled back toward the corridor together, Kyle clutching the boxes like they contained his soul. Above them, another beam groaned ominously. "Drop them!" Alara shouted. "No!" The beam gave way with a crack like thunder. Alara shoved Kale hard, sending them both sprawling as burning timber crashed where they'd been standing. The boxes flew from his hands, papers scattering. "Leave them," Alara gasped, hauling him to his feet. "But now, Kyle!" They ran, the fire chasing them like a living thing. Behind them, the corridor collapsed in a shower of sparks and destruction. They burst into the stone corridor just as the east wing entrance caved in completely. Hands pulled them to safety. Mrs. Brennan was shouting something. Thomas was yelling orders. Alara collapsed against the wall, coughing so hard she thought her lungs would tear. Kyle was beside her, equally wrecked, staring at the inferno they'd barely escaped. "The documents," he said hoarsely, "are replaceable. You're not." He looked at her, something raw and grateful in his expression. But before he could speak, a shout went up from the servants. "It's spreading! The fire's jumped to the roof!" Alara forced herself upright, her legs shaking. The east wing was lost, that much was clear, but the main house could still be saved if they acted fast. "Everyone to the roof," she commanded. "We need buckets up there now. and someone check the attics. Make sure they're empty." The battle raged for 3 more hours. The entire household fought, Duchess and servant side by side, soaked and exhausted and refusing to quit. Village men arrived with more water, more hands, and slowly, painfully, they began to win. By the time dawn broke gray and cold over the manor, the fire was out. The east wing was a blackened skeleton, still smoking, but the main house stood. Alara sat on the front steps, too tired to move, watching the sunrise paint the destruction in shades of pink and gold. Kale sank down beside her, his shirt burned in places, his hands blistered. "We lost the east wing," he said. "We saved the house. The documents can be reconstructed. The local magistrate will have copies of the deeds. The bank has records of the contracts." She looked at him. "You almost died for papers, Kale." "Those papers represent everything I've been trying to save. And I represent your wife. Which matters more?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, You matter more." Something in Alara's chest loosened. She leaned against his shoulder, not caring that they were both filthy and reeked of smoke. "How did it start?" she asked. "I don't know. The study's been unused for months." Kale frowned. Unless what? "The oil lamps in there. I told Mrs. Brennan to have them removed weeks ago. They were old, unstable." His jaw tightened. "But I never followed up." "So it was an accident." "Maybe." But he didn't sound convinced. Mrs. Brennan appeared, looking haggard. "Your graces, the staff is all accounted for. Minor injuries only, thank the heavens. And the fire inspector from the village is here. He wants to examine the site." The inspector was a grizzled man named Doyle, who'd apparently seen every kind of fire the county could produce. He spent 2 hours picking through the ruins while Alara and Kyle cleaned up and changed clothes. By the time they reconvened in the morning room, Doyle's expression was grim. "Arson," he said without preamble. Alara's teacup froze halfway to her lips. "What?" "The fire was set deliberately. I found accelerant patterns in 3 separate locations. Someone wanted that wing to burn." Kale stood slowly, his face dangerous. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I've ever been. This wasn't an accident, Your Grace. Someone lit this fire on purpose." The implications crashed over Alara like a wave. Someone had tried to destroy the manor, tried to destroy them. "Who had access to the East Wing?" Doyle asked. "Everyone," Mrs. Brennan said quietly. "It's not locked. Any servant, any guest." "We haven't had guests in weeks," Kyle interrupted. "Not since—" He stopped, looked at Alara. "Lissa," they said simultaneously. Doyle wrote something in his notebook. "Lady Crane was here yesterday?" "Yes," Alara said. "She and I had a confrontation. Then Kyle asked her to leave." "And she was upset?" "That's putting it mildly," Kyle said. "She threatened us, said we'd regret it. That's motive. Means and opportunity depend on whether she could have accessed the East Wing after leaving." Doyle closed his notebook. "I'll need to question her. In the meantime, I'd advise caution. If she did this once, she could try again," Alara finished. After Doyle left, Alara and Kyle sat in silence, the weight of it pressing down. "We can't prove it was her," Kyle said finally. "Not yet. But who else?" Alara stood, pacing. She was furious, humiliated, and fire fits her perfectly. Destructive, hard to trace back, maximum damage. Even if it was her, proving it will be nearly impossible. She's too smart to leave evidence. "Then we make her admit it." Kale looked up sharply. "How?" "By making her think she won. By giving her exactly what she wants." Alara's mind was racing, pieces falling into place. "She wants to destroy our marriage, wants me gone, so we let her think it's working." "I don't like where this is going." "You don't have to. But consider, if we stage a very public argument, make it seem like the fire was the final straw, Lissa will think she's succeeded. She'll get cocky, sloppy. That's a dangerous game. Everything about this is dangerous, but what's the alternative? Let her get away with attempted murder? Wait for her to try again?" Alara stopped in front of him. "We need to control the narrative, make her reveal herself." Kael studied her for a long moment. You've changed. Since that first night. We both have. Yes, but you... He shook his head slowly. You've become formidable. I've become what I needed to be. Alara held his gaze. So, are you with me? Always. They spent the rest of the day planning. The story would be simple. The fire had destroyed irreplaceable estate documents. The financial losses were catastrophic. Alara and Kael were fighting about what to do next, her wanting to salvage things, him wanting to cut losses. It has to look real, Alara said, which means we actually have to fight, in public, where people will talk. Helena's hosting a garden party this weekend, Kael said. Half the county will be there. Perfect. We'll make sure the performance is memorable. The days before the party were spent in careful preparation. They worked with Doyle to document everything about the fire, building a case even if they couldn't prove it yet. They also worked with contractors to assess the damage. The East Wing would need to be completely rebuilt, a massive expense. But beneath the chaos, something had shifted between Alara and Kael. They moved together now with an ease that hadn't existed before. Discussed strategy over breakfast, made decisions as actual partners. At night, they shared the same bed, finding comfort in each other's presence. The fire had burned away more than timber and stone. It had burned away the last of their pretenses. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, warm sun, light breeze, exactly wrong for the emotional devastation they were about to perform. Alara dressed carefully in pale blue, letting Margot arrange her hair in an elaborate style. She looked every inch the Duchess, composed, elegant, about to fall apart. Kael was waiting by the carriage, looking severe in dark gray. They didn't speak during the ride to Ashford House, saving their energy for the show. The garden party was already in full swing when they arrived. Guests scattered across the immaculate lawns, drinking champagne and pretending they hadn't all heard about the fire at Draven Manor. Helena met them at the entrance, her expression sympathetic. Alara, Kael, I'm so glad you came. How are you both holding up? We're managing, Alara said, her voice carefully strained. If there's anything I can do... Actually, Kael interrupted, his tone clipped. We need a moment. Perhaps the terrace? Helena's eyes sharpened with interest. Of course. I'll make sure you're not disturbed. Bombies! The terrace overlooked the gardens, visible to anyone who cared to look, but separate enough for privacy. Perfect. Alara waited until she saw people noticing them, then turned to Kael. We need to talk about selling. I told you, we're not selling. We don't have a choice. The documents are gone. The East Wing is destroyed. We'll rebuild. With what money? Alara's voice rose, carrying across the gardens. Several heads turned. We're already drowning in debt. This fire, it's the final straw. So you just want to give up, run away? I want to be realistic, something you've never been good at. Kael's face darkened, half performance, half genuine frustration with the position they were in. Don't lecture me about reality. You've been here 6 months. I've been fighting to save this estate for 8 years. And failing. Maybe it's time to accept that some things can't be saved. The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. Around the gardens, conversation had died. Everyone was watching now. Is that what you think? Kael asked quietly. That I'm failing? I think you're so obsessed with pride and legacy that you can't see when it's time to let go. And I think you're looking for an excuse to leave, to go back to your comfortable life and forget this marriage ever happened. Alara flinched. That one hurt, even knowing it was scripted. Maybe I am. Maybe this whole thing was a mistake. Finally, something we agree on. Kael turned and walked away, leaving Alara standing alone on the terrace. She waited 3 seconds, then pressed her hand to her mouth and hurried in the opposite direction. The murmurs started immediately. Alara could feel the gossip spreading like wildfire as she made her way through the gardens, keeping her head down. She found a quiet corner near the rose garden and sat on a stone bench, waiting. It didn't take long. Duchess Draven. Lissa appeared like she'd been summoned. Are you all right? That looked rather intense. Alara looked up, letting her eyes be slightly red. I'm fine. You don't look fine. Lissa sat beside her, all false sympathy. What was that about? Nothing, just stress. The fire's been difficult. I heard you lost the entire East Wing. How devastating. The East Wing we can rebuild. It's everything else that's falling apart. Alara let her voice crack slightly. The documents? The finances? The marriage? Oh, my dear. Lissa's hand on her arm was poison wrapped in silk. I did warn you that this arrangement wouldn't work. You did. Alara met her eyes. You were right about everything. Lissa's smile was victorious. It's not too late, to get out. You could leave him, start over somewhere else, and let him win? What does winning matter if you're miserable? Lissa leaned closer. Between us, I've been where you are, trapped in something that looked good from the outside but was empty inside. It's not worth it. But you loved him, didn't you? Something flickered across Lissa's face. I thought I did, but love and possession are different things. I wanted to own KL. You want him to see you. She shrugged. Neither works. Men like him don't change. Then what do you suggest? Leave. Tonight, if you can. Before it gets worse. Lissa's voice dropped. Before something else happens. There it was. The slip Alara had been waiting for. Something else? Like what? Oh, I don't know. Accidents happen around that crumbling old manor. Fires, falls. Who knows what could go wrong next? Alara's blood ran cold, but she kept her expression neutral, confused. That's a horrible thought. I'm just being realistic. The place is dangerous. You almost died in that fire, didn't you? How did you know that? Lissa blinked. Word travels. Everyone knows you and Kael both went into the burning building. We haven't told anyone that detail. Alara stood slowly. Only the household staff knew, and the inspector. I must have heard from someone. Who? Who told you we went inside? Lissa's composure was cracking. I don't remember. One of the servants probably. They gossip. Our servants don't gossip to outsiders. We're very particular about that. Alara stepped closer. So how did you know, Lissa? Unless you were there. Don't be ridiculous. I left that afternoon. Did you? Or did you circle back after everyone settled in for the night? Light a few fires in the old study knowing it would spread? That's insane. Is it? You threatened us, said we'd regret choosing each other over you, and 12 hours later the manor nearly burned down. Alara's voice was steady, relentless. The inspector says it was arson, 3 points of ignition, accelerant. Lissa's face had gone white. You can't prove anything. Maybe not, but I don't need proof. I just need people to ask the right questions. Alara glanced around the garden. At least a dozen guests were watching from various distances. Like why Lady Crane knows details about the fire that were never made public. Why she's so confident something else might happen. Why she's been systematically trying to destroy my marriage since the day it began. Stop. You're making a scene. Good. Let them see. Let everyone see exactly what you are. Lissa stood abruptly. You have no idea what you're doing. You think you've won? You think one little confrontation changes anything? I think it changes everything, because now people are paying attention. And the next time something happens, and we both know you won't be able to help yourself, they'll remember this conversation. You're bluffing. You have nothing. I have you, scared, defensive, making mistakes. Alara smiled coldly. Keep talking, Lissa. Please, make it easier. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Lissa turned and fled, pushing through the guests with all her earlier composure shattered. Helena appeared at Alara's elbow. Did I just witness what I think I witnessed? That depends. What do you think you witnessed? Lady Crane inadvertently confessing to arson. She didn't confess, but she revealed more than she intended. Alara turned to Helena. I need your help. I need you to make sure everyone here knows exactly what she said. Let the gossip work for us this time. Helena's smile was fierce. It would be my absolute pleasure. Within an hour, the story had spread through the entire party. Lady Crane had revealed suspicious knowledge about the fire, had made veiled threats, had practically admitted to being there that night. By the time Kyle found Alara, the damage was done. How did it go? He asked quietly. Better than expected. She took the bait and ran with it. And people heard? Everyone heard. Helen is making sure of that. Alara looked up at him. We're still not free of her, but we've wounded her, damaged her credibility. And our marriage? Our public fight? About that? Alara raised her voice slightly, aware of nearby listeners. I'm sorry for what I said on the terrace. I was angry and scared and took it out on you. Kale caught on immediately. I'm sorry too. You're right that we need to face reality, but reality is that we're in this together. We save the estate together or we lose it together. Together, Alara repeated, just loud enough to carry. He kissed her forehead, a gesture of reconciliation that would fuel gossip for weeks. They left the party shortly after, united and stronger than they'd arrived. In the carriage, Kyle took her hand. That was brilliant. Dangerous, but brilliant. She made it easy. All that arrogance, she couldn't help but gloat. Doyle will want to know what she said. I'll write down every word while it's fresh. Alara squeezed his hand. But Kyle, this isn't over. She'll retaliate. Let her try. This time, we're ready. The investigation moved quickly after that. Doyle questioned servants, examined the timeline, built his case. 3 days later, he appeared at the manor with a constable. We found evidence, he said. A lamp was purchased in the village the day before the fire. The shopkeeper identified Lady Crane as the buyer. That's not enough to convict, Kyle said. No, but combined with her statements at the garden party, which half the county witnessed, it's enough to question her formally. Put pressure on her. Do it, Alara said. Lissa was questioned that evening. Alara wasn't there, but Helena sent word of what happened. She denied everything at first, then started making excuses. By the end, she was threatening legal action against everyone involved, not the behavior of an innocent woman. The scandal exploded across the county. Lady Crane, accused of arson, the Duchess who'd exposed her, the Duke who'd chosen his wife over his mistress. Alara found herself suddenly, unexpectedly, popular. Women who'd snubbed her months ago now sought her company. Invitations poured in. People wanted to hear her story, wanted to align themselves with the Duchess who'd stood up to Lissa Crane. It's like they've forgotten I was new money and scandalous 6 months ago, Alara said over tea with Helena. You're not scandalous anymore. You're formidable. And people respect that more than breeding, Helena smiled. Plus everyone hated Lissa. They just needed someone brave enough to stand against her. I wasn't brave, I was angry. Same difference. The point is you won. Not just against Lissa, but for your place here. People see you differently now. It was true. The change was palpable. When Alara attended the county assembly the following week, people made space for her, deferred to her opinions, treated her like she'd been Duchess for years instead of months. And beside her always was Kyle, solid and present in a way he'd never been before. They were rebuilding more than the East Wing. They were building a partnership that actually functioned, making decisions together, disagreeing without destroying each other, learning to trust. The night of the assembly, they danced again. This time, there was no performance, just two people who'd chosen each other moving together with hard-won grace. People are staring, Kyle murmured. Let them. I'm done caring what people think. Since when? Since I realized the only opinion that matters is yours. She looked up at him. Do you think I'm doing well as Duchess? I think you're doing better than I ever did as Duke. That's not an answer. Yes, you're extraordinary. Is that what you needed to hear? No, but it's nice anyway. He pulled her closer. Propriety be damned. I don't tell you enough. How grateful I am. That you stayed. That you fought for this marriage when I was ready to let it die. I didn't fight for the marriage. I fought for myself. Alara smiled. The marriage was just collateral benefit. Either way, thank you. The music swelled. Around them, other couples danced, but Alara only saw Kyle, the man she'd married as a transaction and learned to choose as a partner. The song ended. Applause rippled through the assembly hall, and for the first time since arriving in this county, Alara felt like she belonged. Not because of her title or her money or who she'd married, but because she'd claimed her place and forced everyone, including herself, to recognize it. 2 weeks later, the formal charges against Lissa Crane were filed. Arson, attempted murder. The trial would take months, but the damage to her reputation was immediate and total. She fled to London in disgrace, her influence shattered, and Alara stood in the manor's entrance hall, watching the morning light paint patterns across the marble, feeling like she'd won something more valuable than any victory over Lissa Crane. She'd won herself, her strength, her place. Cale found her there, sliding an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything looks now. How different I feel." "Regrets?" "None." "You?" "Only that it took us so long to get here." Alara leaned into him, comfortable in a way she'd never imagined being in this house. "We got here eventually. That's what matters." They stood together in the light, two people who'd started as strangers and become something infinitely more complicated. Partners. Allies. And maybe, just maybe, something even deeper than that. The East Wing's reconstruction had begun. Every day, workers arrived to rebuild what fire had destroyed. And every day, Alara and Cale rebuilt too. Not the structure, but the foundation of their marriage. It wasn't perfect. They still fought, still disagreed on estate management and finances and 1,000 small things. But they fought as equals now, as people who trusted each other enough to be honest. And that, Alara thought, was worth every struggle that had brought them here. Spring came to Draven Manor like a promise kept. The scaffolding around the East Wing grew taller each week, new timber replacing charred beams, fresh stone covering blackened walls. Alara stood at her bedroom window most mornings, watching the reconstruction with something close to pride. They were building it better this time, stronger, like everything else in their lives. "You're up early again," Cale said from the bed, his voice rough with sleep. "Couldn't help it. I wanted to see the progress." "It'll still be there in an hour." "I know, but I like watching it change." She turned to face him. "Besides, we have that meeting with the creditors today. I wanted time to prepare." Cale groaned and pulled a pillow over his face. "Don't remind me. You're the one who scheduled it. Past me was an idiot." Alara laughed and climbed back into bed, pulling the pillow away. "Past you was practical. These debts aren't going away just because we ignore them. I liked it better when I could pretend they didn't exist. That's what got you into this mess in the first place." "Fair point." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. 5 more minutes. Then we'll face reality." They'd been doing a lot of that lately, facing reality. The fire had destroyed more than the East Wing. It had also destroyed the last of Kael's illusions about managing everything alone. The creditors were circling, and without the annual payments from Alara's father's estate, they needed a new plan. The meeting was held in the library, creditors arranged around the long table like judges at a tribunal. Alara recognized most of them. Lord Pemberton, always looking for weakness. Mr. Hastings from the bank, stern and numbers-focused. Lady Thornberry, who'd inherited her late husband's business interests and wielded them like weapons. "Thank you all for coming," Cale began, standing at the head of the table. "I know there are concerns about the estate's financial position." "Concerns?" Pemberton interrupted. "The East Wing burned down. Your wife's family fortune evaporated. We're past concerns, Draven. We're at crisis. Which is why we're here," Alara said smoothly, "to present a solution." Lady Thornberry raised an eyebrow. "The Duchess has a solution? How novel." There was enough condescension in her tone to make Alara's jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. "The estate has assets beyond the manor itself. Land, tenant farms, timber rights. We're proposing a restructuring. Restructuring is just a polite word for default," Hastings said. "It's a polite word for reality," Cale countered. "The old payment structure was unsustainable even before the fire. We can keep pretending otherwise and watch everything collapse. Or we can adapt." "Adapt how?" Pemberton demanded. Alara opened the folder in front of her, passing documents around the table. "We're proposing to convert some debt to equity. Parcels of land that aren't central to the estate's operations, leased long-term to creditors with profit-sharing arrangements. You're selling off the estate piece by piece. Well, Lady Thornberry said. We're creating partnerships, Alara corrected. The land generates income. You profit. We reduce debt. Everyone wins. Except you lose control. We lose land we weren't using effectively anyway, but we keep the heart of the estate intact. Alara met each creditor's gaze in turn. The alternative is forcing this into bankruptcy, which helps no one. You'd get pennies on the pound in liquidation. This way, you get real returns. The room fell silent as they reviewed the documents. Alara could feel her heart pounding, but kept her expression calm. This plan had taken weeks to develop. Every detail argued over late into the night. It was sound. It had to be. Hastings spoke first. The numbers work, assuming the land valuations are accurate. We had 3 independent assessments, KL said. All came back within 5% of each other. And the legal structure, the partnership agreements, already drafted, subject to your approval, of course. Alara pushed another set of documents forward. We're not asking you to trust us blindly. We're asking you to consider a mutually beneficial arrangement instead of a mutually destructive one. Pemberton was still scowling, but Lady Thornberry looked intrigued. What about the timber rights? Those could be quite valuable. Shared revenue for 20 years, then revert to the estate, Kyle said. You get immediate returns, we get long-term stability. And the tenant farms? Same structure. We maintain oversight. You collect a percentage of profits. Alara leaned forward slightly. Look, we're not pretending this is perfect, but it's pragmatic, and right now, pragmatic is the best option any of us have. The discussion went on for 2 hours. Questions, objections, negotiations over percentages and terms. But slowly, grudgingly, the creditors began to agree. By the end, they had commitments from everyone except Pemberton, who left still grumbling about lost opportunities. That went better than expected, Hastings said as he packed his papers. I'll have my solicitor review the contracts. Assuming everything checks out, you have my support. After the creditors left, Alara collapsed into a chair. We did it. You did it, KL corrected. Those terms, that presentation, that was all you. We're partners, remember? Your credibility got them in the room. My numbers kept them there. Still, I couldn't have done this without you. He pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her waist. A year ago, I would have tried to handle this alone. Probably would have made everything worse. A year ago, I wouldn't have had the confidence to face them. Alara rested her forehead against his chest. We've both changed. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better. They stood like that for a long moment, the relief of survival washing over them. Then Mrs. Brennan appeared with news that pulled them back to reality. Your Grace, there's a message from London about Lady Crane's trial. It's starting next week. Alara's stomach knotted. She'd been trying not to think about the trial, but it was inevitable. The culmination of months of investigation and legal maneuvering. Will we have to testify? She asked. Most likely, Mrs. Brennan said. The prosecution has requested your presence. KL's hand tightened on Alara's. Then we'll go, together. The journey to London felt like traveling backward through time. Every mile brought memories of Kael's absences, of lonely nights wondering where he really was, of the woman who'd tried to destroy them. The courthouse was imposing gray stone, all sharp angles and intimidating architecture. Inside, the prosecution had set up a war room of evidence. Photographs of the burned wing, chemical analyses of the accelerants, testimony from the shopkeeper who'd sold Lissa the lamp. It's a solid case, and the prosecutor told them. But juries are unpredictable. We need your testimony to establish motive and opportunity. Alara's testimony came on the third day. She wore dark green, powerful but not aggressive, and kept her hand steady as she swore her oath. The prosecutor led her through the timeline, the confrontation at Helena's gathering, the argument on the terrace, Lissa's visit to the manor the day before the fire. And what did Lady Crane say during that visit? Marsha, the prosecutor asked. She told me the marriage was failing, that my husband would never love me. But he goes sem. Alara kept her voice level despite the memory stinging. She said I should leave before something else happened. Something else? Did she elaborate? No. But when I saw her at the garden party after the fire, she knew details that hadn't been made public. She knew my husband and I had gone into the burning building. She mentioned accidents happening around the manor, fires, falls. Objection, Lissa's defense attorney rose. Speculation, the witness is implying intent that wasn't explicitly stated. Overruled, the judge said. The witness may describe what was said. Alara continued, recounting every word of that conversation. The way Lysa had revealed too much, the smugness that had turned to panic when Alara pressed. On cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to shake her. Isn't it true, Duchess Draven, that you had reason to want Lady Crane punished? She was, after all, your husband's former lover. She was trying to destroy my marriage. Yes, I wanted her stopped. Stopped? Or punished? Both, if she was guilty. But you wanted her guilty, didn't you? You needed someone to blame for your troubles. Alara met the attorney's gaze steadily. I needed the truth. Lady Crane provided that herself through her own words and actions. Convenient that those words were heard by dozens of witnesses at a public event. Convenient for justice. Yes. The attorney tried a few more angles, but Alara held firm. When she was finally dismissed, she felt wrung out, but intact. Kyle testified the next day. His account was more clinical: dates, financial records, the escalating threats after he'd ended things with Lisa. But his presence was powerful, the wrong Duke standing firm against the woman who'd tried to destroy him. Lissa's defense was that the fire had been accidental, that her knowledge of events came from servants' gossip, that the lamp purchase was innocent coincidence. But the evidence was damning: the multiple points of ignition, the accelerant patterns, her own words at the garden party. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, Alara was gripping Kyle's hand so hard her knuckles were white. On the charge of arson, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Lissa's face went ashen. Her attorney was already preparing appeals, but the damage was done. Lady Lysa Crane, society darling, untouchable aristocrat, was convicted. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Alara and Kale pushed through them without comment, climbing into their carriage in silence. It wasn't until they were blocks away that Alara finally spoke. It's over. Not quite. There's still sentencing, appeals. But the verdict, that's what mattered. She turned to him. She can't hurt us anymore. Kale pulled her close. No, she can't. They stayed in London one more night in a hotel that was blessedly quiet after the chaos of the trial. Lying in the darkness, Alara felt something shift inside her. A weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying finally lifting. What are you thinking? Kale asked. That I'm tired of fighting. Ready to just live. We still have the estate to rebuild, the creditors to manage. I know, but those are problems to solve, not battles to survive. She rolled to face him. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Battles are about proving yourself. Problems are just about getting things done. She traced the line of his jaw. I'm done proving myself. To you, to society, to everyone. I just want to be. Kyle caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Then be. We'll figure out the rest as we go. They made love slowly that night, not with the desperate urgency of earlier months, but with the patient confidence of people who knew they had time, who weren't racing against some invisible deadline, but building something meant to last. The return to Draven Manor felt like coming home for the first time. The estate was transformed by spring, gardens blooming, fields green, the reconstruction of the east wing visible from miles away. As their carriage rolled up the drive, servants lined up to greet them, and Alara realized with a start that these people weren't just staff anymore. They were her people, her household. Mrs. Brennan met them at the entrance with tea and updates. The creditors had all signed the partnership agreements. The first timber harvest was exceeding projections. 3 new tenant families had moved into the restored cottages. You've been busy, Alara said. Just following your instructions, Your Grace. Everything you set in motion before you left. Our instructions, Alara corrected, glancing at Kyle. The Duke and I work together now. Mrs. Brennan's smile was knowing. Of course, Your Grace. That evening, Helena came to visit, bearing wine and gossip. The whole county is talking about the trial, she said, settling into the drawing room. Lissa Crane convicted. The Duchess Draven triumphant. You've become something of a legend. I've become exhausted, Elara corrected. But victorious, I suppose. More than victorious. You've changed how people see you, see this estate. Helena accepted a glass of wine from Kael. A year ago, everyone expected this marriage to collapse. Expected you to flee back to your father's house within months. A year ago, I expected that too. But you didn't. You stayed. You fought. You won. Helena raised her glass. To the Duchess, who refused to fall. They drank to that, and Elara felt the title settle around her shoulders like it finally fit. Not Duchess as transaction or obligation, but Duchess as earned identity. Over the following weeks, life found a new rhythm. Mornings were spent managing the estate, Elara handling finances and tenant relations, Kael overseeing reconstruction and land management. Afternoons brought social calls and county business. Evenings were theirs alone. They argued still, about budgets, about priorities, about whether the South Pasture needed new drainage. But the arguments felt different now, productive instead of destructive. One night, lying in bed after a particularly heated debate about grain storage, Kael started laughing. What's so funny? Elara demanded. Us. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be arguing with my wife about grain storage at midnight, I would have thought they were insane. And now? Now it feels normal. Good, even. He pulled her closer. I like that you care about grain storage. Well, I like that you listen when I explain why the current system is inefficient. See? We're perfect for each other. We're disasters for each other, but somehow it works. Somehow, he agreed, kissing her temple. The East Wing's reconstruction finished in late summer. The entire household gathered for the unveiling, servants, tenants, creditors who'd become partners. Even Helena and several county families attended. The rebuilt wing was beautiful, better than the original, with modern conveniences and stronger construction. Standing in the completed ballroom, the first room to be finished, Elara felt tears prick her eyes. What's wrong? Kael asked quietly. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She looked around at the space they'd created from ashes. A year ago, I stood in this house feeling like a prisoner. Now I'm standing here feeling like I built something that matters. You did. We did. We did, she repeated, tasting the words. That evening, they hosted a ball to celebrate the completion. The first real entertainment Draven Manor had seen in years. Elara wore deep crimson, feeling bold and powerful and entirely herself. The county's elite filled the ballroom, the same people who'd judged her months ago now treating her like she'd always belonged. It should have felt vindicating. Instead, it just felt like progress. She was dancing with Lord Pemberton, who'd finally signed the partnership agreement after the trial verdict, when he said something that stopped her mid-step. I was wrong about you, Duchess Draven. Were you? I thought you were a pretty investment, a way for Draven to stabilize his finances. Pemberton's expression was surprisingly humble. But you're the one who stabilized everything, the estate, the finances, the Duke himself. We stabilized each other. Perhaps. But don't sell yourself short. What you've done here, it's remarkable. He nodded toward Kael, who was dancing with Caroline Winters. He's a different man than he was a year ago. Stronger, more present. That's your influence. Elara didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. Later, when she and Kael took the floor together for the final waltz, she told him about the conversation. Pemberton thinks I changed you, she said. He's not wrong. I think you changed too, all on your own. Maybe, but you made it possible, made it safe to change. Kael pulled her closer than propriety allowed. I was drowning before you came. I just didn't realize it. And now? Now I'm swimming, still struggling sometimes, but actually moving forward instead of just trying not to sink. The music swelled around them, and Elara let herself simply exist in the moment. In this ballroom, they'd rebuilt. In this marriage, they'd forged from nothing. In this life, they were creating together. When the ball ended and the last guest departed, they stood together in the empty ballroom. "It's beautiful," Elara said, looking at the chandeliers, the polished floors, the walls that smelled of fresh paint. "It is. But you know what I realized tonight?" "What?" "The East Wing could burn down again tomorrow, and we'd be fine. Because what we've built, the partnership, the trust, that can't be destroyed by fire." Elara turned to face him fully. "That's surprisingly philosophical for midnight. I have my moments." He smiled. "Rare, but they happen." "I love you," she said suddenly. The words surprised her as much as him. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't even trying to. But somewhere between hating you and tolerating you and respecting you, it happened." Kael's expression went soft in a way she'd never seen. "I love you too. Have for months, probably. I just didn't know how to say it. So say it now. I love you, Elara Draven, my wife, my partner, the woman who saved my life by refusing to give up on it." They kissed in the empty ballroom, surrounded by evidence of everything they'd survived and built. And for the first time since their wedding night, Elara felt like the marriage was real. Not a transaction or a convenience, but an actual choice they'd both made. Months turned into a year. The East Wing became fully operational. The estate's finances stabilized. The partnership agreements with creditors generated steady income. Slowly, carefully, they were building something sustainable. Elara's mother visited that autumn, the first time since the funeral. She looked better, still grieving, but no longer drowning in it. "The estate is beautiful," she said, walking the grounds with Elara. "Your father would be proud." "Would he? I sold his business. You saved me from ruin. That's what he would have wanted." Her mother squeezed her hand. "He always knew you were stronger than him, smarter. He just didn't tell you enough." "He told me at the end. That was enough." They walked in comfortable silence for a while before her mother spoke again. "You're happy here. I can see it." "I am, finally. And the Duke? Your marriage?" Elara smiled. "We're good. Really good, actually. It took almost destroying everything to get here, but we're good. That's all any of us can ask for, to find something real in the wreckage." That winter brought news that Lissa Crane had been sentenced to 12 years. The appeals had failed. She was truly, finally, gone from their lives. Elara felt nothing when she heard. Not triumph or satisfaction, just closure. "Should we celebrate?" Kael asked when the news arrived. "No, let's just move forward. She's taken up enough of our energy." "Forward sounds good." They spent that winter planning, not just for the estate, but for themselves. Travel they wanted to do. Projects they wanted to start. A life beyond just survival. Spring came again, and with it, a different kind of news. Elara missed her monthly courses, then missed them again. The doctor confirmed what she'd suspected. She was pregnant. She told Kael in the library, the same room where they'd had so many arguments and breakthroughs. "I'm going to have a baby," she said simply. Kael went very still. "Our baby." "Yes, our baby. Are you... Is this..." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "This is everything. You're everything." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the magnitude of it sank in. A baby. A heir. A future. "I'm terrified," Elara admitted. "Me too. But we'll figure it out. Like we've figured out everything else. Together? Always together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Elara worked through most of it, much to Mrs. Brennan's consternation. She wasn't ready to step back from the estate she'd fought so hard to claim. But as her body changed, so did her perspective. She found herself thinking not just about the estate's present, but its future. What they were building for this child. What kind of legacy they were creating. The baby came in early autumn, during a rainstorm that rattled the windows and made the whole manor feel like it was holding its breath. The labor was long and brutal. At one point, Elara was certain she was dying, but Kael stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand, letting her squeeze until his bones ached. When the baby finally arrived, a girl with dark hair and a furious cry, Elara felt something fundamental shift inside her. "She's perfect," Kael whispered, holding their daughter with shaking hands. She's ours, Ilara corrected. That makes her perfect. They named her Catherine, after Ilara's mother. Catherine Rose Draven, heir to everything they'd built. Holding her daughter in the days after birth, Ilara found herself thinking about that first night in this manner. Standing alone in a silent house, feeling like she'd made the worst mistake of her life. If she could go back and tell that version of herself what was coming, the battles, the fire, the trial, the love, would she believe it? Probably not. But she'd survived it all anyway. Built something extraordinary from what should have been a disaster. What are you thinking about? Kael asked, settling beside her on the bed. How far we've come, how different everything is. Better or worse? Better. Infinitely better. She looked down at Catherine, sleeping peacefully. She'll never know how hard we had to fight for this. For each other. Maybe that's a good thing. She'll just grow up seeing parents who love each other. And a mother who runs the estate finances. And a father who actually listens to her. Ilara smiled. We're going to make mistakes with her. You know that, right? Probably. But we'll make them together. Together, Ilara repeated. The word that had become their foundation. 2 years later, Ilara stood in the same spot she'd stood on that first terrible night, the entrance hall of Draven Manor. But everything had changed. Catherine toddled around the marble floors, her laughter echoing off the high ceilings. The household staff moved with comfortable efficiency, no longer uncertain of their place. The estate's finances were stable, the partnerships with creditors profitable. And beside Ilara stood Kael, no longer a stranger she'd married out of desperation, but the man she'd chosen to build a life with. Hard to believe it's been 3 years, he said. Feels like a lifetime ago, like those first months happened to different people. They did in a way. We're not who we were then. No, we're better. Helena arrived for afternoon tea, bringing news of county politics and social scandals. Caroline came too, and several other women who'd become genuine friends. The drawing room filled with conversation and laughter. This was what Ilara had fought for, she realized. Not just the title or the estate or even the marriage, but this, community, purpose, belonging, a life she'd built with her own hands. That evening, after Catherine was asleep and the guests had left, Ilara and Kael walked the estate grounds together. The east wing stood complete and beautiful, no trace remaining of the fire that had almost destroyed everything. Do you ever think about how it could have gone differently? Ilara asked. Sometimes. Usually when I can't sleep. What do you think would have happened if I'd left after that first night? Kael was quiet for a long moment. I think I would have lost everything. The estate, yes. But more than that, the chance to actually live instead of just survive. That's what we're doing now. Living. Finally. They stood together watching the sun set over land that was theirs, not through transaction or inheritance, but through choice and work, and refusing to give up when everything seemed impossible. Ilara thought about her father's last words. Be big. Be impossible. She'd done both. Built something extraordinary from ashes and anger. Claimed her place not by asking permission, but by simply taking it. And in the process, she'd found something she'd never expected. Love. Not the romantic fantasy kind, but the real, hard-won, built-on trust kind that actually lasted. Thank you, she said suddenly. Kael looked at her, surprised. For what? For being terrible at this in the beginning, for making me fight for every inch, for eventually meeting me halfway. He laughed. That's a very specific thing to be grateful for. I'm a very specific person. She took his hand. But I mean it. If this had been easy, I wouldn't have become who I am. We wouldn't have built what we built. So you're saying my being a terrible husband made you a better Duchess? Something like that. I'll take it. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. For what it's worth, you made me a better man, a better duke, a better everything. They walked back to the manor as twilight deepened, their daughter sleeping inside, their future stretching ahead like unexplored territory. It wasn't the marriage Ilara had imagined. It was better, messier, and harder, and infinitely more real. And standing in the entrance hall that had once felt like a prison, looking at the life they'd built from nothing, Alara finally understood what victory actually meant. Not winning against someone else, but choosing yourself. Again and again, until the world had no choice but to recognize it. She'd come to this house as a transaction, a convenience, a desperate measure. She'd become its heart. And that, Alara thought, as Kael's arm wrapped around her waist and Catherine's soft breathing drifted from upstairs, was the only ending that mattered. Not perfect, not easy, but earned, and entirely, unmistakably hers.